Peace and welcome to the Travelers Podcast. I'm Brother Ali. This is something that's been a dream of mine for many years. And so just by listening to this, by watching it, by being here, you're part of what's becoming a dream come true for me. And so I just want to start by thanking you. Beyond words, I'm very, very grateful to be on this journey, and I'm really happy that you're here for it. This is the first episode, and so what you'll hear is and watch is going to be me sharing stories from my life that I think might help give a picture and give some context for who I am and how I am and the way that I understand myself in the world. I'm going to check in a couple times during this podcast because we have sponsors and we have partners, and you're free to skip those if you want, but I just want to let you know that the partners and sponsors of this podcast are an extension of the podcast itself. It's almost like they're guests on the podcast in a way. These are entrepreneurs and community leaders and humanitarians that have businesses and services and programs and movements that I believe in. These are people that I know. You know, it costs money to do a podcast. It's extremely time consuming to do a podcast, especially to do it well and to be consistent. May Allah allow us to do it well and be consistent. It's a big investment. And so, you know, you need sponsors if you're going to be sustainable. And I understand that, you know, there are a lot of companies, corporations that like to get the word out and peddle their wares on podcasts because it's a medium that reaches, you know, listeners and viewers that others don't. And I respect that. But for me, it's really important that these are people that I know. These are movements and charities and programs that I believe in. And, you know, and these are things that have enriched my life. So I'm actually happy to share them with you. So just know that when it comes up. I want to make a note on this particular episode, this first episode, you know, for those that are watching the video that you can watch wherever they have video podcasts, and you can watch it on our YouTube page and things like that. I've gotten pretty good at doing audio because I've been recording myself, and I've been a hip hop artist for years and years. So audio is pretty good. I'm good at that. Video, I'm not. That's very, very new to me. Photo, video, anything visual. You'll hear in the podcast that I'm partially blind. So I've just always been happy to leave that to others. But when I finally had the time and space to launch this podcast, it's partially because my family moved from the United States to Istanbul, Turkey. And so this space that you're seeing behind me is my office. And when I came into here, this place it needed a lot of work. And so I came in here and, you know, cleaned it up, painted it, decorated it. But I also had to learn way more about cameras and lenses and apertures and lighting and depth of field and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, that way more than I ever intended to. But I'm grateful to have learned it because now I know it, you know what I mean? And it's now another area where I'm able to be independent. But in this first episode, you're going to see, if you're watching it, that there's a lot of visual glitches just where the video shakes. And it has to do with the platform that I was using to record and things like that. So that will not be the case going forward. But I just want to thank you in advance for being patient with that. I just sat down and spoke from the heart, and I wanted to leave it that way. I thought about re-recording once we fixed that problem. But I figured, you know, I spoke authentically, and I wanted to leave it that way. Also, I want to acknowledge that in this episode, I share some stories about my parents, and not all of them are happy, joyful stories. A lot of them are revolving around tension. And my parents are both gone. You know, my mother died when I was in my 20s of cancer. My father died when I was in my 30s of suicide. And his father died that way as well. A lot of other people in my family. So every time we tell, you know, our side of a story that involves another person, it's almost certain that we're going to wrong them in some way. And the last thing we want to do is wrong other people, especially the people that gave us life and that gave us birth and cared for us when we were young. So that's just something that I'm aware of, you know, but I thought that it was really important for me to share at least my perspective on all of these stories that I'm going to be sharing in this episode. And there is one thing that I forgot to mention specifically about my father, about my dad, that when I come back on the outro at the end of this, that maybe I'll add that. But thank you so much for being on this journey, for being on this ride, and enjoy episode number 1 of the Travelers Podcast. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love, beautiful people. I'm Brother Ali. This is the first episode of the Travelers Podcast. I'm really, really grateful that you're here. I'm hoping that this will be a long and fruitful and interesting journey together. I'm a person that loves to communicate. I love to connect. I love to talk. I love to listen. I think that a big part of what drew me to music and keeps me exploring myself, expressing myself in the form of music and then traveling around the world to perform for people. There are times where the profile or the level of fame goes up and down, especially as an independent artist. There are times where the money goes up and down. But the thing that keeps me coming back to it year in and year out for the last 20 years, and really even longer than that, but professionally for 20 years, the thing that keeps me there is that music is such a really beautiful and profound way for human beings to really bond with each other and connect with each other on a level that almost circumvents the mind, and it really allows people to connect with each other on a heart level, on a soul level, and even on a physical level. When there's music playing, literally the sound is vibrating our bodies, and our bodies are moving in conjunction with the music, and we start to breathe together. And that's a very beautiful thing. One of the other things that really touches me, though, are stories. And it could even be said that human beings are a collection of stories. So much about who we are and how we are and the way that we are, the way that we understand ourselves and the world that we're in, the ways that we understand each other. It's really a combination of something in our chemistry, something in our particular alchemy of attributes and characteristics. But so much of it has to do with the experiences that we have and the ways that we process and understand those experiences, and then the emotional reaction that we have and the emotional framing that we have around the experiences that we've had. And so communicating through stories is a really, really beautiful thing. And I think it's always needed. I think that, our bodies need food, our bodies need water, our bodies need sun, our bodies need warmth, our bodies need, certain things. But I also really believe that our hearts need connection with each other. I think that human beings need each other in the non-physical part of who we are as well. So in our soul, in our hearts, in our intellect, and even our egos, we just need each other. And we can't see ourselves without one another completely. Each of us shares a unique perspective that informs each other. And so I think what I want to do for this first episode of the podcast, even though a lot of these episodes will be me talking to the people that I do life with and share life with, and asking for their perspective and sharing with them. I think that for this first one, I would like to just share a particular collection of stories that have formed me and molded me and delivered me at the gate, or at the beginning, at the start point of this particular journey of the Travelers Podcast. So I'm very, very grateful for you being here. I'm going to try to not be too long-winded, but I'm sharing with you a specific set of stories. I realize that all of us, in sharing our stories, our interpretations are already built into them. And, I could share a certain set of stories that would give you an idea of who I am as a parent, or my relationship with mental health, or who I am as a lover, or who I am, specifically as a musician, or as a believer in God, or as a worshiper, or as a, community member, and things like that. So the specific set of stories that I've kind of thought about sharing in this episode, and there's no way to say it all at once. And that's something that I had to learn in music. You don't have to say it all at once. My man Ant, that I made most of my music with, always says to me, there'll be other songs, there'll be other albums, there'll be other, you don't have to say it all now. And so, my attempt is just to share a few stories here. But some of these accounts and some of these experiences that I want to share with you, I think will really, I'm hoping, help give some perspective into the perspective that I have, help to give some context. So much of why these platforms are valuable is that a lot of times we're viewed by others without context, and that's a crime. It's a crime to look at a human being outside of their context. And so I think that it's really important that people have the opportunity, myself included, to share some of the context and to share, including in that context, our intention and our goals and the things that have moved and motivated us. So that's what I'm going to do here. And again, if you're watching this and listening to this, this is going to be a story about how I have been loved and been shaped and molded for what I believe is the particular mission that I have. I believe that I've been given a very specific assignment in this life. And so my goal has been to try to understand that assignment and then to try to fulfill it. And it's been conveyed to me through a lot of love and through a lot of teaching, So let's jump in. I think that the first way that I knew myself and understood myself was through the lens of being an albino or being a person with albinism. Some people don't like the term albino. Some people with albinism don't like the term albino. I use it because it's something that I had to have a relationship with. It's something I had to learn how to love. It's the framework that I was given to understand my particular presentation to others and to myself. Albinism is a condition that's really misunderstood. It's very rare. Albinism is a condition. It's a genetic condition that's carried in the form of recessive genes, meaning that people can carry the gene for albinism and not have albinism themselves. That gene is very rare. And basically what it does is when it actually expresses itself in a person, when a person has albinism, it means that they don't have the melanin or the pigment that would give color to their skin, hair, and eyes. And so they don't have whatever normal color they would have had in their body. Also, it affects, melanin affects the way that the brain develops, and it especially affects the way that the eyes develop. So people with albinism have a really specific set of visual challenges. So the first of which is that our optic nerve doesn't develop the way that other people's normally would, and so we just have really low vision. Vision is measured in this way that's really strange, in my opinion. So if somebody has 20/20 vision, that means that two people with perfect vision or with normal vision could stand 20 feet away from that visual chart with those letters on it, and numbers and things like that. And they would see it the same way. Somebody with lower vision than that, somebody, for example, with 20/40 vision, it would mean that the person with 20/40 vision would stand that 20 feet away, but a person with normal vision would have to stand 40 feet back instead of 20. and they would have the same clarity from 40 feet that the person with 20/40 vision would have from 20 feet. So my vision is 2200. At that point, it's kind of like measuring an airplane in horsepower. It's kind of like we're not measuring by horses anymore. So the idea being that a person with normal vision would have to stand 200 feet away from something that I was seeing from 20 feet away, and we would see it the same way. Along with that, we have extreme sensitivity to light. So even a little bit of light is very, very, very bright and even blinding. You know, if you've ever been in the dark night and somebody shines a flashlight in your face, you know, or if you've ever been in a situation where you're in a dark room and suddenly all the lights come on, and that feeling of being blinded by light, this is what albinos are experiencing a lot of the time. Even with normal conditions or low light conditions, you know, this is just a reality that we live with. On top of that, my eyes don't work together, and so I don't have depth perception. So I think where normally people would see in 3D, so the microphone, for example, or the mixer over here, or the computer and the camera over here, I'm not able to see those things in 3D. I'm seeing them the way you would see them in 2D, in two-dimensional flat, like TV. So I have to take other cues for how far away things are. So basically what this means is that people with albinism go through life looking really different. And on top of that, we burn in the sunlight. If we're out in the sun for any length of time, we get sunburned. The sun is really harsh for us. Light is really harsh for us. And, you know, for me, when I try to move around, I'm considered legally blind or partially sighted or partially blind because of the fact that anything you need to be able to see to do, I can't do. So I can't drive a car. That's the most noteworthy of them. I can't drive. You know, when I walk, I get lost a lot. Anyone that's ever walked around with me knows that I trip on things all the time because I can't see when the sidewalk is coming up or when there's a bump in the street. I can't always see that. Or, you know, sometimes if things are curving, if a surface is curving, something like that. Visual cues, you know, things like that I can't really see. I hit my head on things a lot. I bump into things a lot. I bump into people a lot, you know. So all of these things are realities. Now, what that basically meant for me, and I think one of the main ways that it's shaped me, especially from really early on in life, is that all of these things really combined for me to just have a really difficult social experience dealing with other kids. You know, my family lived in these little towns in the Midwest. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My parents were raised in Madison, Wisconsin. And I had a lot of tension with them growing up. And we'll talk about that more later. But we moved a lot. And so, you know, not only did I have this experience of showing up for school on the first day of school or in a new school where people knew each other and I didn't know them, I looked really different. And I got lost in the hallway. I bumped into things. I used to have these thick glasses, you know, that were tried to help my vision and also gave me some, you know, some relief from the brightness. And, you know, it was just a really jarring experience to go to school, especially in these little towns in the Midwest where my family would move because they were overwhelmingly white, maybe 95% white. And they would maybe be, you know, 5% black. And then there would be, you know, mixed in families from other places. So there might be a family from Ecuador and they would be called Mexican. And there'd be a family from Laos and they would be called Chinese, you know, but it was overwhelmingly white. And when I was born and when I was, you know, really young, I just didn't have friends. I didn't go outside and play. I didn't know children. I didn't have other, you know, there may be someone that would be friends with my parents, like their friends would come over, things like that. But I didn't have friends. I didn't go outside and play. So my first interaction with other people my age was going to school. And that was harsh. I mean, I would go to school and basically be ridiculed. You know, now they talk about bullying, and I think, you know, I've also always been big. And, people tried to physically bully me. And what I learned pretty quickly is that if I was willing to fight them, I've never been necessarily good at fighting. It's just that I'm not afraid to do it. And so pretty early on, I realized that if you fight them and if you make it difficult for them, even if you don't win, if you make it difficult enough that like there's going to be pain in physically bullying me, you're going to have some pain too. So I got over that part pretty quickly, but being socially ostracized was just a reality for me. And it happened over and over and over again. So even if I got to a place where people started to get a little bit used to me, we'd move again, and then I had to start the whole process over again. One city in particular that we moved to was particularly harsh. We moved to a new city. This is the mid-'80s. Moved to a new city. I started a new school. And on the first day of school, I'm stumbling over things. I'm getting lost. I'm trying to find where to go. And this conversation starts up that happens every year. Why does he look like that? Why does he look? I have a song about this called Pray For Me, if you've ever heard it. People that know that song will recognize this story. And so they're having a conversation about why does he look like that and who is this and all this kind of stuff. And people had all sorts of explanations for this. The things that I heard when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, 6 years old in first grade, 7 years old in second grade. The things that I would hear were, his parents are cursed by God. His parents are brother and sister. All of these different explanations, and none of them were good. And this year in particular, I think it may have been second grade, maybe third grade. I don't necessarily remember. But they were having a conversation about why does he look like that? And some kid stood up and as authoritatively as he could be, announced from across the classroom, he's got AIDS. And it was almost like the early introduction to fake news because he said it so authoritatively that became the truth. And I had an Adidas shirt on, and someone said, yeah, his shirt even says AIDS. These are 7-year-old children, And so that became the reality of it. That became the truth of it, that he's got AIDS. And so I spent that year with my name being AIDS. People didn't know my name. When I was born, my name was Jason. I changed it when I was 15. And became Muslim. But people didn't know me by my name. My teacher knew my name, but the people in that school called me AIDS like it was my name. Again, this is the mid-'80s. It's maybe 84, 85. And AIDS was brand new on the scene. People didn't know what caused it. They just knew that it was a dangerous, strange disease. And in hindsight, not everybody called me that. And not everybody was dehumanizing me. Not everybody was talking to me like that, but the most vocal people were. And the other ones that weren't saying that, they didn't have the strength or the conviction or the power or the voice to do anything about it. So it might as well have been everybody. In reality, it might have been 3 or 4 or 5 kids that were doing that. And I didn't realize how awful the name AIDS really was. It just became so normal to me. It was like my nickname, I realized how bad it was one time when I was lost in the hallway and another teacher who wasn't my teacher saw me and she wanted to help me. And so she was calling my name and she was trying to ask me, hey, where do you want to go? And she didn't know my name. And I was standing pretty close to her so I could see her face. And she was like, hey, AIDS, and I saw the horror on her face when she said that, almost as if she had told herself that she would never say that to me. Like it was a promise she made to herself that she just broke. And it looked like she was about to cry. And that's when it really occurred to me that maybe this isn't so nice, what these people are calling me. There were years when I was in those early grades where I had ulcers. I was hospitalized actually because I had ulcers. I didn't know how to explain it. I just thought my stomach hurt. But it really was just being dehumanized and being talked about and spoken to and dealt with by people for this, every single day, and not having any connection with anybody, not feeling like I had a friend, not feeling like I was sharing life with anyone, feeling alone. And then, and then when I start to interact with people, they're talking to me like this. So the next year, I found out we were going to move again, and my mother had an idea. My mother was adopted. My parents are white, and she was adopted, and they had closed adoptions at that time. This is the 1950s when she was adopted, and they did what they call closed adoptions, where they, a child is given up for adoption, they go to an orphanage for a period of time, and then they're placed with a family, and the family never has contact with the birth mother and the birth family. The records are sealed as part of policy. So people grow up never knowing their parents, never knowing the family they come from, and it's illegal for that information to be shared. So my mother grew up never knowing where she came from or who her people were. But she was a dark-haired white lady that was adopted into a Norwegian family in Wisconsin. And so she dyed her hair blonde to fit in. She got their last name, which was Anderson, and she fit in. So she had the idea, we're going to move to another city, and nobody at that school, no one there knows that you're albino. So what we can do is we'll dye your hair, and we'll get you these tinted glasses, and you'll be able to fit in with people, and maybe you'll have a chance. She loved me. When you love someone, you hate to see them suffer. And she wanted me to have a chance, So I sat down she took me to a kind of inexpensive salon. They used to have these stores called Myers Thrifty Acres, which is like the predecessor to Walmart. It's like one store, big box store. You could get everything. You could get your produce, and you could get a bike, and you could get a, hunting sport gear, and you could get everything. You could get your car fixed, and you could get your hair done. So if you can imagine, we go to this place. It's not a high quality hair salon, but she says we want to dye his hair blonde. What we quickly learned is that hair dye works by attaching itself to the color that's already in your hair. So because I didn't have any, my hair turned out purple. Sometimes they talk about elder women, like in Florida or something like that, they'll call them the blue hairs because their hair goes gray or white, silver, and then they try to dye their hair with this kind of inexpensive way, and it turns blue, and mine turned purple, like Prince pants purple, bright purple hair, punk rock purple hair, which isn't better than white if you're trying to fit in. And so we came home, and my family did not have much money. Part of why we moved from city to city every year is my dad was always trying to find better work, and she said, we're going to have to take him to a nice place. And I remember my parents having an argument about me going to this other salon. It was a big deal. It was a major point of contention for them. So, we went to a more expensive salon. I sat down in the chair and went through this long, arduous process with these chemicals that smell horrible. They kind of burned my head a little bit. And when we finally got done, they took the towel off my head this time, and last time I had this experience of having orange hair. But this time I look in the mirror and my hair is blonde, and it almost looks like maybe I can pass for a regular white boy, And it looks like me, but it doesn't look like me. And I look like them, but I don't look like them. And then on top of that, anyone who has gray hair knows that if your hair doesn't have color, melanin, pigment, your hair just grows straight out. The way my beard does, the way that my hair grew like that out of my head as well. It just grows straight out. Maybe sometime, if you're nice to me, I'll show you pictures of what my hair looks like. But it just grows straight out of my head. So not only do we have to deal with the color, but we had to change the texture. So we got this Aquanet hairspray, and we would comb part of my hair and then and lay it down and then spray it. And the spray basically would turn it hard like a helmet. And then we would part it and lay it down and then spray it with the spray. And I realized that I was going to have to go through this process with all these chemicals and all this stuff. But they started talking about when I had to come back. So you got to come back in 2 weeks. You got to come back in a month. And I said, oh man, I have to do this again? And then they informed me as a little 7, 8-year-old boy that yes, your hair is going to keep growing. And the hair that grows in, your new growth, especially along your part, is going to be white. And so what I realize is that the hair that grows out of me naturally is my secret. And I'm going to have to go back constantly to keep up the facade that I'm not really an albino, you know, that I'm just going to pass, you know. And I spent that year of my life, as difficult as the years before that were, that was the only time in my life that I would really say that I was, for a long period of time, depressed. And I thought about questions as a 7, 8-year-old boy. Why am I alive? What am I doing here? Why should I even be here? You know? And I realized subconsciously that something about dyeing my hair, not only changing the way that I look, was saying something to me on a subconscious level about the people that had been dehumanizing me. That there was something about what they were saying that was right, that I needed to change the way that I look. And not only change the way I look, but I needed to disguise myself to look more like those people so that I could be acceptable to them. It reinforced this idea that there was something wrong with who I am and what I look like, you know? And so I went through school like this. Now, as I mentioned, the schools that I went to were overwhelmingly majority white, small town, northern, Midwestern schools that had a small black population. And one of the things they did at that time, and they do it to this day in school systems and schools that are overwhelmingly white and have a small black population, it's almost like they're acknowledging that they're not really going to serve these black kids. Now, if someone from that small black population, or maybe a couple kids, are exceptional, then those kids will actually have a chance maybe to get somewhere academically. But they have to really be exceptional. But what they do is they bring in, you know, a black staff person to deal with those students. And they usually give them a job that's seen as menial. So, you know, since this time, they developed the role of, behavior specialist. But basically, this is the black person that's there to keep the black kids under control while we go about the business of teaching the white kids. And so in my school, the woman whose job that was a lunch aide. She, you know, kept the kids in line while they ate lunch. She talked to them. She, you know, opened their milk and kept them on track and got them out to recess and made sure they were behaving and sitting down and quiet and things like that. And I can remember it very clearly. And I would imagine that schools in the Midwest and probably throughout America are still like this. But certainly when I went to school, they were like this, where you could see very clearly at lunch, it looked out like prison. There were all these tables of white kids, you know, maybe sports kids sat next to each other, maybe artsy kids sat next to each other, people that were in band, people that, you know, did different things. People sat with maybe the people that they lived with in their neighborhoods. But then there would be one table or maybe two that were all black. And then, you know, the one family from South America and the kid from Asia, and then also the children, the very rare kids in the 80s in the upper Midwest where, you know, their dad was black, their mom was white, so they're mixed race kids. At that time, they called them mulattoes. It was a terrible word. But They had to choose. They had to make a choice. Do I sit with the black kids? Do I sit with the white kids? And lunch was a very, very specific picture and symbolic image of where you were in the social chessboard of the school and of the community. So I sat by myself, and I normally would sit near the attendant, because I figured if I was closer to them, I would maybe be a little bit more safe from the scorn, the ridicule, dehumanization, or whatever that I was experiencing with the kids. So this black woman spoke to me. Now, one thing I want to say about albinism is that albinism arises and exists in all ethnic groups, in all racial groups. It happens all over the world. It happens in every group of people. But there's a misconception that albinos are black. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that I think that albinism is just so much more visible in black families. You have a black family, and then they have a white baby, and you'll see people with African features but light skin and blonde hair, and maybe even like blue or reddish eyes, so it's very noticeable. But it's not only that, there are other connections between black Africans and albinism, and it would appear as though that particular condition does come from probably East Africa. There's a study saying that in Europe and America, basically places that are now overwhelmingly white, the majority of people there would be considered white. 1 in 17,000 people have albinism. 1 in 17,000. In sub-Saharan Africa, in black Africa, that number is 1 in 5,000. So that's 1/3. 1/3 of people, or it's 3 times more likely, 3 times more people with albinism. In Tanzania, where they have a difficulty right now with people with albinism in Tanzania, so there's been specific focus in Tanzania. It's 1 in 1,700, 1 in 1,700 versus 1 in 17,000 where European people are the majority. So 10 times as many in East Africa. So there is this link, and everywhere that I've been in the world, there's an understanding, and what I've experienced is a feeling that black people from the entire diaspora, both the continent of Africa and also the diaspora, there's this feeling that albinos are ours. And there's an understanding of albinism, and usually it's either normal or it's actually celebrated. If you look on Instagram, there's all these accounts, Albinism Beautiful, where these parents are posting these pictures of how beautiful their albino children are. And almost all of them are black. And then, and I've had experiences in my life where, one of them, I was in West Africa in the Gambia, and I got lost. I was going to visit one of my teachers, and I got lost in this neighborhood of dirt roads and compounds and things. And I see these 2 little girls that are maybe 7, 8 years old walking. And they spoke to me. They were like, hi, or hello. And so I said to them, Gambia is almost entirely Muslim. And I had on a thobe. I had on like a long, like Muslim garment, like robe, prayer garment. And I said, Salaam alaikum. And one of them said to the other one, the Tubab said, Salaam alaikum. Tubab means white man or foreigner or visitor. And the other one said to her, she said, he's not Tubab, he's Funet, which means he's not white, he's albino. And these people don't know me. You know what I mean? They don't know my teacher. They don't know anything about me. One time I was in Australia, in Brisbane, Australia, at a music conference with 2 friends of mine. Both of them are black. One's name is Ashanti Abdullah. The other is Tunji. So I'm walking in this outdoor market with Ashanti and Tunji. And this man was walking towards us, that looks like he's probably West African. And out of the three of us, he looks at me and he says, "Salaam alaikum. Are you okay? Salaam alaikum, brother. Are you okay?" And I was like, "Wa alaikum salam." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, man. How are you? You good?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "All right." And then we kept walking. And we walked maybe about another 2-3 minutes. And Ashanti and Tunji were just like, why did that man talk to him? How come out of the three of us, he spoke to him? But that's been my experience throughout my life. And this woman is a really good representation. She's one of many people that I've had similar experiences with. But this woman started talking to me. Now, mind you, this is the year that I'm showing up every day. I'm getting up an hour early so that I can hairspray my hair down so that I can pass, and I'm wearing these tinted glasses. My guess is that she probably knew what was going on. So what she said to me is, we started talking about music, and she talked to me about Elvis. She would talk to me every day. She talked to me first about Elvis, and she's like, yeah, Elvis is cool, and Elvis sings and dances and all this stuff. And she said to me, Elvis is great, and if you didn't know any better, you might think he's the king of rock and roll if you don't know where his music actually comes from. And she said, look at his hair. She said, well, look at that hair. He had that pompadour hairstyle. And she said, look at the other white kids. Does Elvis's hair look like any white kid's hair? I said, no. She said, yeah, he's putting all kind of stuff in his hair, gel and all this stuff to change the way his hair looks. Why do you think he's doing that? I said, because it's cool. She said, yeah, it is cool. But then she showed me Muddy Waters. And Muddy Waters obviously is one of the godfathers of the blues, in the blues tradition. Comes from Mississippi and then moved to Chicago and made electric blues and all this different stuff, chess records, all this stuff. And she says, Muddy Waters is the one that Elvis is trying to sound like. So now I'm listening to Elvis's music. I'm sorry, to Muddy Waters' music. And I'm hearing the original inspiration for what's making Elvis want to play the blues. She said, Elvis wanted to be part of this thing. Like, he didn't want to steal it. He wanted to be part of it. But I'm hearing the difference. There is a stark contrast between the music of "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," rock, and then you hear Big Mama Thornton's original version of that, and you hear her wailing, and the bass is hitting, and the guitar is another rhythm instrument, and the drums and there's a certain pocket going on with the rhythm section, and the music is in your body, and you just hear the texture and the electricity and of the voice and of everything that's being played, and it's more than just the sounds they're making, but there's something emanating from the soul. You hear all this pain and all this joy and all this elation. You hear something that's really deeply human, and it moved me in a way that's like, okay, this is really speaking to me in a way that Elvis never did, And then you go from that to hearing Elvis. But she said, but look at Muddy Waters' hair. She said, Elvis is making his hair look like that because he's trying to look like Muddy Waters. He's trying to look like the person that he is wanting to sound like, and he wants to be part of this culture of the blues. She said, okay, but does Muddy Waters' hair look like the black kids at this table? Does our hair naturally look like that? If you can go look at a picture, or maybe Brendan, the producer, can drop in a picture of Muddy Waters. But Muddy Waters was this big, to me, he looks like he's, over 6 feet tall, 250 pounds, no fat. He just this big, very beautiful, golden, dark skinned man. But he has processed hair. And she said, Muddy Waters went through a process to make his hair look like that. There's chemicals, and you have to, relax it and go through this whole thing. They call it a process. They call it, relaxer, all this stuff. And she said, why do you think he's doing that? I said, to look cool. I don't know any better. But she says, he was trying to look acceptable to white people because he didn't think that he was beautiful. She said, black people, we didn't think that we were beautiful. And we thought we had to look like the people that oppressed us and enslaved us and colonized us. So we put all these chemicals in our hair to look more like them, both to communicate to them that, like, I'm on your program. The great comedian Paul Mooney said, when your hair is relaxed, white folks relax. Because it's a way of communicating, hey, I'm not a threat, you know, but also with internalized anti-blackness, with internalized white supremacist European standards of beauty. She said, you know, he wanted to look acceptable. He also wanted to look good. And so she said, so Elvis is singing Muddy Waters music and changing his hair to look like Muddy Waters, and Muddy Waters is changing his hair to look more white. So she said to me, what are we gonna do about this? And this is why I suspect that she probably knew what was going on with me. You know, she said, what are we gonna do about this? So then she brought in to me and showed me James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. And she said James Brown at different times in his career had a process, he had a perm, he had a whatever. But at this point, this was a period where we believed that black is beautiful and that we couldn't be acceptable to anybody else until we're acceptable to ourselves. And the way that God made us was going to have to be something that we began to celebrate. And so she said, so people in that time started to cut their hair, all that chemical processing, relaxing, you know, changing of their original selves and growing out their original natural hair. And she said, this is the way that you actually reclaim yourself. This is the way that you know that you're valuable and that you're a human. Nobody will ever respect you more than you respect yourself. And then it became really directed to me. She said, these people talk about you not because of anything wrong with you. She said, they don't know who they are. And she didn't say white people, but it's the way that it landed in me. They don't know who they are. And if you look at the invention of whiteness, yes, there are Greek people and there are English people and there are German people and there are Polish people. Those are cultures that have history. Those are cultures that have music and traditions and stories and mores and folkways and spiritual tradition and religion, and they've got all these different twists and turns in the legacy and saga of their group identity. But whiteness, what is white? What does it mean to be white? White just means that you're better than somebody else in the social pecking order. And she said they don't know who they are by themselves. They only know themselves as being better than someone else. So they need you to fulfill the role of thinking that they're better than, but it has nothing to do with you, especially once you understand that they're not better than you. And she said, God made you look the way you look because you have a special role in life. She said to me that if God meant you to be a regular person, he would have made you regular, but God made you for something special. She was a Christian woman. She said, God made you look different because this is your training for whatever you're going to become. And she said, you have a big mission in this life. And I believed her. And not only did I believe her, but what I started to realize is that this woman knew something. Her experience gave her an understanding about life that my mother's experience didn't give her. That this woman was going to teach me how to not only live, but how to live fully in myself, in my body, in my reality, with my experiences. And she understood that in ways that my mother couldn't, and that it wasn't necessarily my mother's fault. Understand now, I'm 7 or 8 years old as this is going on. So I don't always have the language, I don't always have the tools to fully understand it. But what became very clear to me is that there are answers to the questions that I have. And life could be livable as long as I have a sense of who I am. And she taught me through sayings. And she taught me wisdom that came directly from the Black experience. You know, she said, so to me, Black is beautiful became the answer for me. You know, and to me, she would say things like, fix your face. Don't ever let them see that they're affecting you, that they're hurting you, because that's why they're doing all this. If they say these things to you and then you look hurt and you're crying and your head is down, she used to say, get your chest off your chin. Don't let your chest touch it. Get your chest off your chin. Your chest, and put your head up, put your shoulders back. Walk like you're somebody. Walk like a child of God. And she used to say to me, fix your face. If she could see me hurting, if you got to cry, go in the bathroom and cry. And then wash your face off, fix your face, and come out here with your chest up off your chin. Because you're somebody. And you can't let them see that they're affecting you. These are the wisdoms that started to speak to me. And there are countless other people like this. This is just one of the stories that I'm choosing to share with you. I'm deeply humbled and honored and grateful to have Zakat Foundation as a partner on the Travelers Podcast. Zakat, Z-A-K-A-T, is a pillar of the Islamic religion. It's a major part of Muslim life. It's basically the pillar of Islam that deals with charitable giving, with giving back, with sharing, with donating to causes for the betterment of humanity. It's a really important thing, an institution in the life of Muslims all over the world. Zakat Foundation is a global charity that's been operating for decades. Specifically, though, we are partnering with their project to help orphans around the world. They currently work in 14 countries, and they do incredible work. They've had this program for a long time. A friend of mine by the name of Amna Mirza, who's becoming something of like a rock star in the world of charitable giving. She was on the cover of LA Weekly. Super dope to see this happening for her because she's a really incredible person. This project and program for orphans within Zakat Foundation is like her baby. Like, she really cares about it a lot. What she noticed is that somewhere along the way in orphan programs, they realized that if they showed photos and they offered photos for people to see, they're like, sponsor an orphan. You see the ads on TV, sponsor an orphan, and you pay for their school and you pay. So it's really great. But what they learned is that a person's heart falls in love with these pictures of children. And so you get to choose the orphan that you want. This became like the standard practice. But what Amna and her team were I just think they're really visionary in recognizing was that she cared enough as a South Asian American woman to ask and to really look into who are the people that are being sponsored, who are the children that are being chosen. And as she suspected, and is not a surprise to anybody that's aware of colonialism and white supremacy and internalized white supremacy, anti-blackness, she discovered that people, these beautiful people that are giving charity, because of these, trends in the human condition, especially in the world that we live in, she was noticing that younger, light-skinned girls were getting sponsored disproportionately. Older children, boys, and people that, and boys from Africa, darker-skinned children were not getting sponsored. And so she really identified that this is a problem. She said, this isn't Tinder. We don't swipe right and left. So she changed the project. She changed the way that Zakat Foundation does their charity program for orphans and their families. And she said, we're not going to offer photos in the beginning. The algorithm is set, the default setting when you go to the site or when you sign up for their program to sponsor orphans, is that the children in most need, the youth and children in most need, are the ones that are helped first. What she does allow is that there are some people that want to sponsor orphans in Palestine or Syria or Somalia. There are people whose hearts are connected to specific places. And so she's like, that's cool, but we're not going to give photos. And so what they noticed is that by making that change, now the reality has gotten much more equitable, much more inclusive, much more directed to the children and the youth and the families that need it the most. Something I want to tell you right off the bat about this as well is that Zakat Foundation, 100% of the donations for their orphan different program go to the orphans and their families. There's no admin fees. Nobody's salary is getting paid. Amna's not getting paid by what you and her team. They're being paid by other fundraising that they do. But 100% of the proceeds go to the children and to their families. Another thing that's important to know is that Zakat Foundation is an Islamic charity organization, but they don't only help Muslims. They help all of the people that are in need in the areas that they work in, and they do not use this as an opportunity to proselytize. This is something that we do as our duty because we're Muslim, but it's not a conversion campaign. You know what I'm saying? A lot of charities that do really good work, part of their work is that they're trying to convert people, and that's not what they do. Another thing that's really dope to know is that Zakat Foundation, in all of the areas where they work, they have people on the ground making sure that these things are facilitated properly. We've seen so many programs like this go off the rails because they just throw money at it. And, you know, they don't actually make sure that they have a presence there to ensure that the people are being actually served. Zakat Foundation has the goal of serving 10,000 orphans by the end of this year. And so if you go to Zakat, zakat.org, it's $50 to sponsor an orphan. Another thing that's so dope about this program, I just feel like DJ Khaled on this, another one. But like this thing is really dope and really powerful. They do not consider orphan. They don't have this like exclusive idea of who's an orphan that says that a child can't have either of their parents. The reality is that if one of their parents is not in a situation, and the parent that they do have has a disability, even is struggling with mental health issues and is not able to provide for the child, they provide for that child. You don't see photos in the beginning, but after they assign you to an orphan, they do start sending you correspondence. You start to see that they're getting medical treatment, that they're eating healthy, nutritious food, not just a bag of rice so that they can say they fed them, but that they're actually eating healthy, nutritious, sustainable food, that they're being educated in ways that empower the people in the community. They're getting medical treatment. You know what I'm saying? Really, the lives of the children are being turned around and changed. And so I'm just very, very honored to be, partnering with Zakat Foundation for this project. Go to zakat.org. You can also follow them on social media. I know that a lot of people that listen to this podcast and are part of this are not going to be Muslim, but I'm telling you that as far as global charities go with issues like this, I know these people and I know how diligent they are about what they would call in the corporate world quality control, really making sure that this thing is done in a really dope way. So salute to Amna and the team at Zakat Foundation. I'm really honored to be partnering with you. And if you're listening to this, go and give them your support. It's a really personal thing to me that we're partnering with and sponsored by Roots Community Birth Center in North Minneapolis, Minnesota. Roots is one of a small handful of community birthing centers that's owned and operated by Black women. Special shout out to Rebecca and to her incredible team. I have 4 children. I was really blessed and honored to be there with all of them during the prenatal visits, and then to be there when they were born. I actually delivered some of my children myself, and then also being a part of the postnatal care and things like that. So the first 3 children were delivered in hospitals. By nurse midwives, by women that were really, dedicated to their work. And we had a variety of experiences. The mothers of my children are Black women. We know that Black women, studies have proven it, but it's also just been known for years that there's a huge disparity. There's a huge service gap, particularly for Black women in the medical industry. And, Black infant mortality is extremely high. And there's just a lot of trouble there. So 3 of the 4 babies we had in hospitals with nurse midwives and had a variety of experiences. Our youngest baby that we had just 2 years ago, we went to Roots Birthing Center. the experience from the first phone call, from visiting the website, from walking in the door, from pulling into the driveway, you know what I'm saying, into the parking lot. This is a home, a converted home in the hood in North Minneapolis, where I lived for the majority of the almost 3 decades that I lived in Minneapolis. It's like right there in the community. You walk in and immediately, like, you're not in a hospital. You're at home. And they're run by Black women, but there are women of all backgrounds that work at Roots. There are people of all backgrounds that are served by Roots. The entire approach and intention and energy and just vibration and sensitivity and sensibility, like when you're in a situation like that where you're welcoming your new family members into the world, like this is their first experience of coming into this realm. It's so powerfully transformative and impactful on the experience itself, and I believe on the children and on the family. Like, this is how we welcome these people to the world, and so the experience around that really, really matters very deeply. So, you know, I just wanted to boost them and to share this platform with them. And I'm really, really grateful that they came on as sponsors and as partners. It's their website is rootsbirthcenter.com. Please, I'm telling you, if you're in the Twin Cities area, if you're in even the upper Midwest, please look into that program for welcoming our beautiful babies into this world. But go to rootsbirthcenter.com. Just double checking, rootsbirthcenter.com. And there's an area there where you can donate, share. Also, I really highly recommend following them on Instagram, because you're scrolling through your feed and you're seeing all of these influencers and people posting memes and posting videos and trying to sell their stuff and whatever else people do. I do it too. No shade, no tea, nothing like that. But then you come across these beautiful photos of capturing moments of babies being brought into the world. And like for me and my family, you know, you're scrolling through Instagram and then you see those moments, you know, and you know that like these are families who are being welcomed as family into this environment. You know, there's a lot that we can rail against and organize against and all of this stuff. But for Rebecca and her team to actually be serving the community in this way, to see a need and to fill it in a way that like fully humanizes it and just facilitates so much healing. It's just a really deeply healing reality. And so, yeah, I'm just really, really honored to be joined on this journey by Roots Community Birth Center. In celebration of this podcast that I've been wanting to do for so long, we're also launching and embarking and heading out, hitting the road on the Travelers Tour. The tour starts on the West Coast in the U.S. There's a couple Midwest dates towards the end, but it'll be March and April of 2022. So as of the recording of this date, it's right around the corner. We're going to hit the road and do concerts after being, you know, off the road for 2 years. You know, I did 18 years on the road all the time, going to every city that I could, anywhere where they would have me, you know, and then we had 2 years off. So I'm really excited to get back to it. But what I wanted to also tell you about is that the VIP for this tour is actually going to be a live version of this podcast. So if you go to the event section of brotherali.com, you'll see that all the tickets are there, but also while supplies last, we try to keep it intimate. So there's not unlimited VIP packages, but if you go there and get the VIP package, you get into the venue early. We do a small, intimate musical performance for you, and then we go into a podcast episode. And, you know, I talk about the things that I'm dealing with, thinking about, working on, what's going on with me. And then we have an intimate Q&A. All of it will be recorded, audio and video, and with your permission, the highlights of which will become special episodes of the Travelers podcast. So be on the lookout for those episodes. It's a really beautiful thing that over the last 20 years, I've been able to build with the people that listen to this music. And so go to brotherali.com, the events section, check out the tickets, get those VIP packages. There's also merch and all kind of stuff on brotherali.com. But we hope to see you soon on the Travelers Tour. And so from that point forward, I became a person as part of an experience, as part of a community. And everybody that I knew, my friends, were almost all black. And not only my friends, I read in Wikipedia, don't trust Wikipedia. Like, if you haven't learned Wikipedia, like, I have a whole daughter in Wikipedia that I've never met. Apparently I have a daughter named Stacy. And I have daughters. I got 3 of them. And none of them named Stacy. But I got daughters in Wikipedia that are like, who is that? Please don't trust what Wikipedia says. But Wikipedia says Brother Ali was accepted in the black community. And I don't know if accepted is the word, because, this is the late 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s. There's a lot going on. But I was treated like a person, and I was in a group of people. And so all of the important people in my life, with very few exceptions, were black. And they had jokes about me, but their jokes were different, because they also made jokes with each other. And the jokes usually were to make light of things that we couldn't do anything about. People are poor, your shoes are messed up, we all know that certain people come to school not smelling good, and who knows what their home situation is like. Are they able to wash clothes? Do they have a home to live in? Are they being cared for? Are they being looked after by people? Or are their guardians actually, are just foster parents that are just collecting the check? Are their guardians, are they hooked on drugs? Who knows what's going on? But if people smell bad, we would joke about that. And we joked about it in ways that were meant to be funny. These weren't dehumanizing jokes. These were jokes that were allowing all of us to laugh at the situation that we were in. So they made hella jokes about me, but the intention was to be funny. You know what I'm saying? All type of stuff that I remember, and I knew because I was genuinely laughing at them as well. Like, they struck me as funny jokes. And if I had jokes back with them, well, then now we're sparring and we're in the same boat together. Also, anyone that's been allowed into the fold of African people, African people are the original people. They're the original human beings. The human beings descend from them. They're the mother and father of civilization, of the human family. And they're not exclusive people, And so this became my reality, and I was brought into people's homes, and I was loved and nurtured and taught and trained, everything from how to speak to people, my basic manners, my basic etiquette, what they call home training. I was trained in people's homes. I taught how to cook, how to clean properly, how to clean my body properly. To this day, the hygiene that I was taught from black folks, I wasn't taught that by my white family. I just wasn't. I was taught how to clean myself properly. I was taught, things about how to be with people, how to speak to elders, how to speak to women, how to respond to different situations in life. The things that really allowed me to be able to interact and to go anywhere and to talk with anybody. I was taught this in my early formative years. And one of the things that became really clear to me is that white people don't understand who black people are. There's this idea that white people have, this superiority idea and this inferiority negative picture that somehow white people or that black people aren't fully human. That they're not intelligent, that they're not virtuous, that they're not, and that they're not dynamic, that they're not whole, full people. That I would look on TV and also just in speaking with my parents, or just when I would be in spaces where people were white, and would just get the vibe and the energy from them. This feeling that black people weren't fully human, but what I was experiencing didn't match that at all. What I was experiencing was people who were sensitive and complicated and hilarious and intelligent and creative and thoughtful and, and also fully human, so very flawed. People really struggling with mental health, people really struggling with, abuse, people really struggling with, addiction, people experiencing poverty, people dealing with all this stuff. But what became really clear to me is that just the treasure of human beings and the perception about them was so obviously different from who they really are. And that's what I believe gave them the ability to not only see that in me, but also to heal me and to give me the framework through which I could live life. And religion was part of that. Spirituality was part of that. Everyone had a relationship with God. Everyone had an understanding and an opinion about who God is and what God wants from us, and or whether or not there was God, And also music and culture began to take on a whole new meaning for me. And so when I through my friends, I learned about hip hop. Hip hop was early. It wasn't on the TV. It wasn't on the radio. It wasn't pop culture. It wasn't everywhere. Not even all black people were into hip hop music. It was a specific group or section of young people that were into hip hop. Even a lot of black elders had a negative opinion about hip hop. That's not music, and they cuss too much, and they're just talking and all this kind of stuff. But what I heard in hip hop music was this is all the genius and complexity and humanity and humor and wisdom and all of my friends. And finally, the world is going to have to deal with, and that the world is really going to get a picture of who my friends are. And so I fell in love with hip hop, and I started, I could break dance a little bit, but I could rap. That was one of the things from really early on. I've always loved words. I've always loved playing with words. I've always had a good sense of rhythm. I've always been big. I've always had a certain presence. And what I realized is that now when I showed up in a different school, if my family moved again, if I showed up in a different school, I started to become known as the dude who could flow. As, have you seen this albino kid that can flow? Have you seen this dude that can spit? I mentioned this in a song called Us. I started rhyming just to be somebody, to make people notice me at the party and not be just the new kid that's albino. Make them say, yeah, I know, but have you heard him rhyme though? Now I take that same around the globe. So that was my currency. And I would hang out with groups of dudes that they might play sports, or they might be cool, or they are doing whatever. They can dance and all these kind of things. They dress the right way and all this stuff. And I don't do any of that, but it's but this dude can rhyme. So I was part of the community, and I would find people to battle. And I just took it way more seriously than anybody else. You know what I'm saying? I had rhymes for every situation that I could possibly be in. I would go, when I would be in a new place, they would take me to the person that they thought could rhyme. And I would have to battle them, and none of them beat me. It meant something more to me than it meant to them, and so I was prepared. I was ready, and so that became my reality. And so this caused a really deep tension with my family, with my parents. Like I said, my parents are from Madison, Wisconsin, and I moved away from there before I can remember it, but my grandmother lived there until she died just last year at 101 years old. She died the day after her 101st birthday. My granny, man, amazing lady. The one that adopted my mother, So my parents grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. So I've gone back to Madison, and Madison is leave it to Beaver White. And I think a lot of the tension between my parents, it reminds me a lot of the Somali immigrants that I see, or being a part of the Muslim community, people coming from other cultures that are very different. And the parents are Somali, and they're our children are Somali. We're going to raise them Pakistani, Somali, Turkish, we're going to raise them the way that we were raised. But it's like, no, it's not going to be that simple. Yes, they're going to be informed by you and your culture, but they're going to be growing up in North Minneapolis, or they're going to be growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, or they're going to be growing up in Houston. It's not going to be the same. And so what's informing them and shaping them is going to be very different. And culturally, they're going to be different from you. So I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s. And, you know, my friends are selling crack and their parents are using crack. And my friends are going to jail. My first friend when I moved to Minneapolis was Ethan Graham and his sister Nadia. And, you know, Ethan was shot and killed. You know, he was murdered. And, you know, my friends are involved in all kinds of stuff that's brand new to my parents. And we had battles. It was really challenging in our house. There was a time where, you know, we had to go to a family reunion kind of thing back in Madison. We drove from Michigan back to Madison, and my dad said, you can't wear jeans and sneakers and a sweatsuit. You have to dress up. You got to wear some type of pants that are made out of cloth. You got to wear a shirt with buttons, and you got to wear dress shoes. So I'm 13, 14, late, you know, this might have been 1990. And so I went and got the version of it that made sense to me. Now, I was a hot mess. None of this is me saying that, like, I've got it together. I wore this shirt that looked like the Gordon Gartrell shirt from Theo, that Theo got, you know, fake silk shirt. I had pants that looked like MC Hammer pants, you know, big at the top and then get small at the bottom. And I had these patent leather shoes with the metal tips, the shiny, shiny shoes, kid and play shoes, you know. And I looked crazy. But I go into the house, and my mother's brother, my uncle, he said, "Oh my God," in front of my whole family. And we lived in Michigan at this time. And he said, "Somewhere in Detroit, there's a dead N-word." And he delivered the full N-word with the hard ER. "Somewhere in Detroit, there's a dead N-word with no shoes on," implying that, like, my shoes had been stolen off a dead black person that had been killed for the shoes. And I remember that in my family, like, some people gasped, some people laughed, but it got quiet for a second. And then everybody just kind of went back to normal. And I went in the back room at my grandmother's house, and I tried to break everything up in there. I just was so angry, and I didn't know what to say or what to do. I was probably 13 at this time, maybe 12, maybe, you know, I was in middle school. You know, another road trip, we're driving home, and it's 3:00 in the morning, and it's me and my dad are awake. Everyone else is sleeping in the car, and gas is getting low. So we're looking for a gas station. And we find this little mom and pop station where their house is right there. They got a little gas station and one gas pump, and they're closed. So we get off, we go to the station. My dad knocks on the door of the house. The light comes on, lady comes out with a robe on. She comes in, she turns on the lights at the gas station. She turns on their little one pump. She turns on, makes coffee for my dad, you know, fills it up, and then we start driving. And again, at this time, I'm, you know, middle school age. And I just said to my dad, you know, if we were black, we couldn't do that. Like, if we were black, we couldn't go to this gas station in the middle of the night, you know. And my dad just lost it, you know. He said, I'm tired of hearing of all this. You know, and I remember he used to say to me, you came out the wrong color. And, you know, it was tough, you know, and he was really frustrated by that and didn't appreciate that. I think the story, because again, we're collections of stories. The story that illustrates this the most to me is that my freshman year in high school, I lived in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right outside of Kalamazoo in the first ring suburb. And in this school, there was a blue collar school and a more white collar school. The blue collar school is where the few black students went. So there was a black community in this school. And again, this is my community. These are my friends. These are my people. And the white collar school, the more a little bit affluent school, the more middle class kind of school. Ours is a working class school, is a middle class school. Same district though. They're having their homecoming dance, so we decide we're gonna go there. The boys are there to holler at girls. You know, I'm there because I'm gonna rap. You know, I bring a microphone with me. I had a tape with my routines on it. I had a full show that I would do at school dances. So we're all at this, you know, and it starts with the game. And starts with the basketball game. So we come in, it's about 25 of us, and they sing the national anthem or play it or whatever. And we sit down for the national anthem. Some of us probably put our fist up. You know, not only was I involved in hip hop culture and all this kind of stuff, but and in terms of my outlook on the world, the people that I was with were very like radical, militant, pro-black, black power, black religion. Like this was our group of people. We loved Malcolm X. We loved Minister Farrakhan. We loved Public Enemy. We loved Khalid Abdul Muhammad. We were reading books by Dr. Naim Akbar. We were, you know, hearing about, you know, Marcus Garvey. And, it, you know, it was a very pro-black, militant vibe. And so, you know, that's where it started. And everyone is really noticing that we're sitting down. And again, I had an Africa medallion that I think somebody gave me, but then people started giving them to me. My friends used to give me things like that. I don't know if I had it on that day or not, but I mean, you know, it's been a constant thing in my life. So, you know, some of the boys after the game got into some sort of altercation or argument with some of the boys in our group got in an argument with some of the basketball players, and they started having a fight. And when I tell you that adults, grown men, teachers, coaches, parents, they all started just beating up me and my group of friends. I mean, you know, punching them in the head, throwing chairs, throwing things. I mean, brutalizing, like beating up these children. And then they call the police. And there's a KRS-One song where he says, when they come to arrest a black man, they need 30 cops or more. I mean, you know, 15, 20, 30 cop cars show up. And the cops show up and they're beating people. They're beating these young black children. And they put people in the cars. And then I think they realized that they had gone too far. And so they let everybody go with a warning, but they just let us out in the, you know, across the street from the school, far away from the school. And just the anger was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The anger, the feeling of being humiliated, the feeling of powerlessness, having been physically beaten up by people and then accused of doing something wrong, you know. And, you know, admittedly, they probably felt a way of seeing these kids come in here, you know, but we're in the same school district. We're allowed to be there. You know, and the fact that these kids aren't standing up for the national anthem, I understand how that might feel to those white parents. But the reality is that these are kids that are going to school and through music and through the preachers at that time are learning about the truth of this country, you know, and they're responding to their lived reality. They're expressing their discontent with the centuries of abuse, you know. That's their right to do that, you know, and they got beat up. And then they got in an argument, you know, with these other boys, but this is something that high school boys do. None of this warrants adults, parents, teachers, coaches, and then police coming and beating up these young children. So we get in a car, everyone gets in the cars. It's about 20 of us. We get in like maybe 4 cars. And the idea is we're going to go hurt them. We stopped somewhere and it was rumored that somebody got a gun, but people had bats and things like that, and we're going to go hurt people. And I remember thinking in my mind, like, this is not going to be good. Somebody's going to get hurt and we're going to get in real, like this night's going to change my life. And Ice Cube's album, Death Certificate, had just come out. And we ended up driving around Kalamazoo, listening to Death Certificate until morning. And the anger that was in that album, and the comedy, and all of the tragic comedy in that album, the way that Ice Cube was verbalizing it, and the skits and everything, it really allowed us, I think, to live through the night, So we go to school the next day, or that following Monday, and there's a black assistant principal, but she brings us all into the office, and she says, you all had a pretty eventful night last Friday. And we're all quiet. It's like, oh man, because what does she know? And, never mind, she's black. She's, she's from the school administration, So she says, what happened? So we start telling her what happened. And she says, well, they're not going to press charges on you. And it's like, press charges on us for what? She said, they're not going to press charges, but everyone here has been issued a restraining order, and you can never set foot on the premises of those schools again, of that school. So it's like, how'd they get all our names? How did they all this stuff? But also, she's like, you all should know that this arrived in your parents' mailbox today. This was hand delivered to your homes today. So I get home, and my parents are beside themselves, and they basically tell me, and I remember my mother saying to me, if you keep with all these black friends, if you keep, you're going to have, their problems are becoming your problems. She's like, this is not who we are. This isn't how you should be. And, they consider themselves liberal, nice northern white people. They were Democrats, all this stuff. They definitely could definitely consider themselves on the right side of history and not racist. But we really fell out about this because I said, no, you don't understand. Those adults were in the wrong. Those police were in the wrong. You don't understand. Like they were, what gives them the right to beat up teenage boys? What gives them the right to, and there was just this, I really realized our perception of power, our perception of police, our perception of all of these things, establishment, everything else, was just not the same. Why would they lie? Why would they lie? So why would they lie? They've been lying about everything for hundreds of years. They're lying about the very existence of this country. What do you mean, why would they lie? Everything about them is a lie. And I left home. I left out, I was 14 years old. I went and I stayed with other people for weeks. And I finally came back. And we didn't talk about it, I just came back. It felt like weeks, maybe it was days, I don't know. But it felt like a long time. And maybe about a couple weeks later, my mother was a teacher. She was an English teacher, English as a second language substitute. She was substitute teaching in a mostly black school in the inner city, the black neighborhood in Kalamazoo. And so she's one of, she's in a place where she's outnumbered. It's mostly black. And she came home and told me about the fact that she, in this black situation she was in, had told everybody about what her son had done and what his friends went through. And the fact that he spoke up for them and he got in trouble with them and all this stuff. And I told myself that I wasn't going to interpret this stuff, but what I have to say is that this gave me such a deep level of distrust, that they opposed me for being in this situation, but then also would try to use it for some culture, for some social capital when they're in a black situation. The distrust was really, really deep, and they started sending me away to summer camp during the summer, and then that's when they would do family trips. I wasn't invited to family trips anymore. One time they went on a cruise, and I wasn't there. You know, they would send me to camp. You know, one year they sent me to camp and they moved. These are all stories that I could tell later. But what I have to say is that my parents, both of them, my mother and my father, did support me in hip hop. They liked the fact that I was rapping. They liked the fact that they could see that it was giving me a sense of purpose and a sense of self. And my mom saw in the paper, this is when we were still living in East Lansing, Michigan. She saw in the paper that KRS-One was coming to town, not to give a concert, but to give a lecture. And so she took me. We went, me and my mother and my little brother, my younger brother, and one of my friends. Actually, one of my few white friends that I really trust, this kid named Jason Sneed. Shout out to Jason Sneed. He went and saw KRS-One with us. Jason Sneed was the kind of guy that would take in anybody, everybody that no one wanted, those were all his friends. And later in that school district, a black kid moved to town named Chris, and me and Chris became best friends. And in hindsight, I kind of abandoned Jason Sneed a little bit. But then I left town. I left and I moved. And he became friends with Chris, Jason Sneed, and Chris became best friends. And Chris actually stayed with Jason Sneed for a while. So in any case, we went and saw KRS-One, and I saw him give a lecture. He lectured for, it felt like 2 hours, about the founding of America, about the truth, about philosophy. I remember him saying, you know, the Greeks enslaved the Egyptians, and the Greeks, you know, killed their philosophers. You know, they killed Socrates. So how are they the fathers of philosophy? They were borrowing these things from the African philosophers that they were encountering in Egypt and other places, in Kemet and other places. And I said, man. And then he talked about the flaws in the Constitution. You know, black people are still to this day listed in the Constitution of the United States. It's 3/5 of a human being. And he talked about Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. He talked about, W.E.B. Du Bois, and he talked about Frederick Douglass, and he talked about, you know, the entire history of America. He talked about the history of religion and the co-opting of religions. You know, Judaism and Christianity are not white religions. How did they become white religions? You know, these are African, Middle Eastern. These are from the original people. These aren't European religions. You know, and he kept coming back to Malcolm X. Talked a lot about Malcolm X. So I sat and watched this lecture, and I was 13 years old. And I remember very distinctly watching, and KRS-One was my favorite artist. I memorized every word that he said on a record to this point. He put out a book with Nelson George called Self-Destruction, Stop the Violence, was associated with that movement. And it was the first book that I had ever bought and read cover to cover. Again, visually, I can't just pick up a book and read it. And when I sat in that audience and I looked around, and I will never forget the feeling that, like, this is what I am. That's what I am, you know. And it's become true, you know. Like I saw this artist who was a speaker, you know, an educator, a communicator, giving a lecture at a university. And I said, this is what I am. I knew it in my bones. And interestingly enough, I know now that lecture tour was started by Dr. Cornel West, who knew the genius of hip hop, and he set that up. This is 1990, and he set that up. And now me and Dr. West have become friends, you know. But here I am all these years later, an MC, you know, and I've lectured. I gave the keynote address at the Nobel Peace Prize Forum, spoken at Harvard and Princeton and Duke and Stanford, and spoken at all the big Islamic conferences and conventions, and spoken in West Africa and Europe and Asia, and you know. And when it came time for the question and answer, I stepped up to the microphone, little 13-year-old me, And I said, I don't know if you make your music with me in mind or not, but I love you and I love everything that you've said. And I bought this book. And when all this, I know you're busy now, but when you're done, would you please sign the book? And he said, never mind, when I'm done, come on stage. And so KRS-One in 1990, when I was 13 years old, brought me on stage. And if you've been around him in real life, you know that he's an enormous man, 6'5" or something like that. And little 13-year-old me, and he asked me questions and he talked to me. And he said that, you should read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And then he signed his page in that book that had a big picture of his face, Boogie Down Productions. He wrote on it, my birth name was Jason. He wrote, Jason, unite humanity, KRS-One. And so immediately after that, I started searching for the autobiography of Malcolm X. This is my assignment. This is how I'm going to become him. So I get in touch, I finally get a hold of a copy, get my hands on the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it took me several years to read it and to digest it. Again, I can't just pick up a book and read page after page after page. I get headaches. I get sick to my stomach. And then also during that time, Spike Lee's movie came out. And so I went through the story of Malcolm X thinking that this is the most honest, brilliant, courageous, amazing human being that I could imagine. I couldn't imagine a more virtuous hero. Like, this was a real life hero that lived in our time. And he inspired Muhammad Ali. He inspired the hip hop movement. He inspired my favorite MCs were KRS-One, Chuck D, Rakim. That's, to this day, those are the people that, and Big Daddy Kane and Ice Cube and Queen Latifah and others, Yasin Bey, Talib Kweli, But these are the people that I patterned myself after. That these are the people that built my sense of identity and purpose and mission in the world. And I heard and read and digested all of the things that Malcolm said from his personal experiences. He talked about conking his hair, sitting in a chair and having these chemicals on his head, and the feeling of looking at himself in the mirror, and that resonated with me. And then when he became a Muslim, he cut all of that off and then grew his hair out. That resonated with me in my own experience. He talked about being at a boarding school where they called him the N-word so much he thought it was his name. That resonated with me. He talked about, his experiences with white people and his critique of white people. I never had any sense of defensiveness or, I agreed with his critique. They just felt true to me. I didn't have any sense that Malcolm's talking about me. But I also wasn't sure. I saw him go into this religion of Islam and I'm like, that is an amazing thing to be. Maybe if I could be something like a Muslim. And then at the end of the book, at the end of the movie, he goes to Mecca and he says, I sat and I prayed next to and I drank out of the same cup, ate out of the same bowl. I slept outside in the stars next to white people that would be called white, but they didn't see themselves as white. And he said, maybe if the person in America that believes that they're white, maybe if they would embrace the religion of Islam, it would allow them to reconnect with the idea of what it means to be a human being. And in my head, I was 13, 14 years old when that happened. I said, I'm Muslim. I don't even know what that means. I just know that I'm a Muslim. And I just started telling my parents that. I started telling people that. I had this and I didn't really I had no idea really what that was. I just knew that we don't eat pork and I don't drink and I don't smoke weed. And, I had these crazy ideas because I was just a mixture, an amalgamation of all the different iterations of Black Islam that were in my world. So I'm listening to 5%ers like Brand Nubian and others, and I'm listening to these tapes. I got these tapes of Minister Farrakhan. And I just listened to them over and over and over and over again. And I got tapes of Malcolm X, a videotape of Malcolm X speaking, different lectures of Malcolm X. And I'm just watching it till I watched that tape till it broke. I watched that, and I watched Do the Right Thing until they broke. And then these rap records, I'm hearing these different references. And then I knew some 5%ers. I knew some people in the Nation of Islam, that they were accessible. You could see them, in Minneapolis, they were out in the street, selling newspapers, and you could talk to them, and they would talk to me, and they welcomed me, and I went to their meetings, and I never was told you can't be here. I never was made to feel anything other than like a brother, and in Black Islam, there are different iterations, but they all teach and believe that albinism is something associated with the original people. Islam is from the world of blackness, from the universe of blackness. This is what they were taught, and this is how I have always been treated, including Minister Farrakhan, including Imam Warifdeen Muhammad, including, the rappers that I've been with, and the, teachers and mentors in the 5% Nation of Gods and Earth, the Nation of Islam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Always been treated like a family member, always been treated like part of the community. And I just had all these ideas in my head. And I remember telling my mother this like, just this collage of language that I was hearing. I also went to the library and got a Koran, Koran, and these different pamphlets. There would be like Orthodox Muslims handing out pamphlets. And so I got these pamphlets, and the guy that sells incense will give you a pamphlet about who is Allah, what is Islam, who is Muhammad. So I'm arguing with my mother based on all this stuff. My dad wasn't even talking to me. But I'm telling my mom, the white man was created by a mad scientist on an island, and there's a spaceship that's going to come and get, and, the Quran is the last of all the books. And it's just this collage of different thoughts and ideas. And I remember my mother saying, there's no way this is a major world religion. And so I found out later, we lived in North Minneapolis, which is a Black community, a Black neighborhood. And the mosque in our neighborhood was in this little house with a handmade sign that said Masjid An-Nur, the Mosque of the Light, and a phone number. So she called the phone number, and I didn't know this until years later. And the man that answered the phone he became, through marriage, the son-in-law of Imam Warifdeen Muhammad. For those that know, I'll give a very brief history of Black Islam in America. So a large number of the people who were stolen and sold into slavery in America were Muslim. West Africa has had civilizations and nation states that are majority Muslim. Ghana, Mali, Shanghai, Timbuktu, Senegal. Very, very rich Islamic tradition throughout North Africa, throughout West Africa, also in East Africa. And so a lot of the people that were brought into Islam were Muslim, but through the process of slave making, through what's described in the Willie Lynch letter, for example, talks about the fact that people were disconnected from their families, from their languages, from their tribe, from their lineage, from their religion, from their God, from their folkways and mores. Everything was done to remove any knowledge of this stuff and to create in enslaved Africans and their children this notion of being less than human. And what was given to them and what was sold to them was a very specific brand of Christianity that was there to reinforce white supremacy, with Jesus being a physical manifestation, or the Son of God as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed that looks just like the slave master. And then also the idea that people are sinners unless they come to. So this very specific type of Christianity, that was given to enslaved Africans. And so people tried to spread Islam and reconnect the children of enslaved Africans with Islam, with their Islamic past, to varying degrees of success. But the one that had the most success was a person who came from the East named Farad Muhammad, who taught in Detroit, Michigan, outside of Detroit, Michigan. And he taught Clara Muhammad, who brought her husband, who became Elijah Muhammad, Clara Poole and Elijah Poole, who became Elijah and Clara Muhammad. And there are many iterations of Black Islam. Noble Drew Ali in the Moorish Science Temple, Dr. Malachi Z. York and the Ansar Allah, there were also Ahmadiyya Muslims who were involved in jazz music in Philadelphia and different places. But Elijah Muhammad built the largest and perhaps the most successful, I would say rivaled only probably by Marcus Garvey, in terms of successful Black nation, independent nation, with newspapers, a school system, with their own food supply chain, everything from farms to grocery stores to bakeries to everything that the people needed. Independent communities all throughout America, starting in 1930. Up until 1975. And Elijah Muhammad was the teacher of Malcolm X and also Muhammad Ali and also Minister Farrakhan. There was a group that broke off from the Nation of Islam that became the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. And that group is the spiritual heart of hip hop culture. From them you get peace, you get the b-boy pose, you get the cipher, you get rhythmic dialectical poetry, the fifth element of hip hop, which is knowledge of self. All of this really has its roots in the 5% Nation of Gods and Earth. That's part of the nation that came from the Nation of Islam. So when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died, his son Wallace, or W. Deen Muhammad, Warithuddin Muhammad, became the leader of the Nation of Islam. And Wallace was the spiritual advisor of Malcolm X. He's the one that gave him the advice to, if you're going to leave my father and leave the Nation of Islam, you should study Orthodox Islam. Wallace Muhammad had been taught Arabic. He had been to prison for refusing the draft. Malcolm and Muhammad Ali wasn't the first to do that in the nation. All the men in the Nation of Islam refused the draft, including Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad went to prison. Wallace Muhammad went to prison. Minister Farrakhan, and all of them faced prison, But in prison also he had really studied, and he went to prison in Sandstone, Minnesota. So Wallace Muhammad believed in Orthodox Islam, a more traditional teaching of Islam. And so when he became the leader of the Nation of Islam, when his father died, he made a lot of changes to the Nation of Islam to make it more theologically orthodox. And then the Nation of Islam basically broke into two segments, many segments, but two main ones. Minister Farrakhan became the leader of the people who wanted to remain with the original theology and also organizational structure of the original Nation of Islam. Wallace Muhammad, Warithuddin Muhammad, led a group of people that built into or grew into a very culturally Black, but theologically and also in terms of practice, more Orthodox or Sunni Islam, Black Sunni Islam. So my mother connected me with an Imam Matthew Ramadan, and a community that she didn't know. She had no way of knowing. This is just the mosque that was in our neighborhood. It was less than a mile from our house. At that time, it was on Bryant Avenue and maybe 16th. I can't remember, but it was on Bryant. At this time, we lived at 36 in Fremont. So it might have been in the 20s. I can't remember. Forgive me. I know that folks will remember. I used to know the address of that place and I forgot it. But in any case, the son-in-law of Imam Warithuddin Muhammad was the Imam there. And my mother brought me there, and he became my Imam and my first teacher. And I started to learn the religion, to recite the Quran in Arabic. And I quickly we went through a whole training to become Imams. We had to memorize a certain number of chapters of the Quran. But we did everything from, learning to wash, learning to pray, learning to lead services. We looked after elders. We were assigned certain elders in our community that we would look after. This is an all-Black community. We were only with each other. We were with each other all the time. All of our free time was spent together. Different generations. There was a number of young guys in their teens and 20s. This is 1993. So, Wu-Tang is just about to come on the scene. But, you got Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Return of the Mecca and the Soul Brother. You got Malcolm X, the Spike Lee's Malcolm X movie. You got Tribe Called Quest, as, Orthodox Black Sunni Muslims. You got Rakim and Big Daddy Kane, and Ice Cube was associated with the Nation of Islam. Public Enemy associated with the Nation of Islam. KRS-One is talking about this stuff. Queen Latifah, all of our favorite rappers, the most lyrical and the most positive and the most powerful rappers at this time, are all paying respect to Islam, Black Islam in its different forms. And we were taught martial arts. We were taught how to wear a suit and tie. We were taught how to interact with women. We were taught how to honor elders. We were taught, it was a continuation of the things that I had been taught. We were taught how to groom. We were taught, when people in our community died, we didn't send them to the morgue. We didn't send them to the mortuary. We washed them with our hands. We washed our own dead, and we buried them with our own hands. Our elders, when our elders die, that's what we do. And I did all of that. We slaughtered animals. We were taught that we should help our wives deliver our babies when they were born, and I did that with my children. And we were taught that young men should become imams, and I became an imam. I started leading the services. There was a time when I worked full time at the mosque. We acquired a building, so anybody that lives in North Minneapolis knows the mighty and famous and loved and respected El Amin family. Really dynasty, the El Amin dynasty. Khalid El Amin, the great NBA star, Imam Makram El Amin, Charles El Amin, the great Arlene El Amin, who was at one time was a secretary for Elijah Muhammad. I was an imam in that community, and that mosque, one of the landmarks in North Minneapolis, the Black community in the Twin Cities. I helped build that place with my bare hands. I helped build it, and I gave the first sermon there. The first Friday sermons I delivered those. I married people. I came and read Quran over people's babies when they were born. I counseled people. I gave shahadas, helped people enter Islam. I taught children. That was my role. And eventually, I got married in that community. And I've been married twice. I got married when I was 17 years old. I've been married twice. My first wife was from Gary, Indiana. Her family is from Gary in Chicago. And she was a second generation, it still is, a second generation Muslim. Her family converted. And there's this just really even more, I think, entrenched me and my thinking and my experiences, in this community of people. Wanted to talk to you for a minute about one of our sponsors and partners, Vice Gerund, makers and merchants of fine tailored clothing. Vice Gerund is a small company run by a really dear friend and brother of mine out of Chicago named Usman Aslam. Usman the tailor is what we call him in our circle. The brother Usman is a really, really dear, very deeply spiritual, intentional presence. Just a soul, just like he's a vibe, you know what I mean? Like people say that, but it's really true of our brother Usman. He is a vibe, man. And Usman creates really beautiful tailored clothing for men. and some of the pieces that I have that I wear a lot, he made me this really beautiful like herringbone overcoat that I wear in the Own Light video. A lot of the pieces that I have, he made me a suit that I lived in for like 2 years, especially when I was like traveling and speaking and teaching and things like that. So Usman was visiting, I want to say, he can correct me if I'm wrong later, but I want to say he was in Thailand, I believe. And he was on a little motorbike zipping around Thailand to go check out different places where they sell material, fabric and things like that. And he found in this burlap sack some material that was intended to be curtains, drapes, this like heavy material, but he noticed like the texture of it. It was a certain type of blue. It had a stretch to it. He also noticed that this material wouldn't wrinkle, that it was really breathable. And so after seeing this, it made him think about me, because he loves me and I love him. And he said, this is going to be a suit for Brother Ali, because he knows that like blue is my favorite color, different shades of blue. So he came home with this material like in a burlap sack on his back and brought it all the way back to Chicago, and then handcrafted this suit for me that, I lived in this thing, man. Because it doesn't wrinkle. If it stains, you just wipe it off. But also, it just, when a garment is made for you, there's just a certain vibe that it gives you. I want to say this about tailored clothing, and specifically about Vicegerent. A lot of people have this feeling that like getting tailored clothes, or even wearing suits, or and they don't only make suits, like they make all types of clothing. They've made Brother Usman has worked with major sports figures. I don't know if I'm allowed to say them. Major people that are on TV, major hip hop artists. There are names that you would know if I said them, but I don't know if they, I don't know if it's a problem for me to say them because I'm doing an ad for them. But he makes the clothes for the person. So there are people that he makes jeans for them. There are people that he makes like ponchos for them. There's people, he makes the clothes for the person. But there's people that might feel like putting all this attention into the way that I dress is narcissistic, or maybe this is me being a diva, or is trying to draw attention to myself. But the reality is that, and I understand that way of thinking. The reality, though, is that it really is a matter of intention, because just the same way that like I set up this studio because I wanted to set a mood and a vibe. When I'm talking to people and when I'm hosting people, I want to be able to basically show them that I put thought into the way that the lighting in here and the way that things are set up, the energy that would create, that would allow for the interaction that we're going to have, the exchange that we're going to have. I want to make people feel comfortable. I want to make people feel honored. I want to make people know that I care about the way that I'm impacting them by the way that I smell, the way that I speak, the way that I present myself. Because it really sets the tone, and it shows the people that I'm engaging and interacting with that I cared enough about this meeting, this exchange, that I started to prepare for it ahead of time. When someone walks into a place and it smells good, when someone walks into a place and the vibe is right, the right music is playing, and it lets them know that I was thinking about you long before I laid eyes on you. And so there's something about the intention and the attention of the way that we present ourselves. Another thing I'll say is that I know that the clothes that I wear that my brother makes for me, I know where they came from. I know that the material was sourced ethically and sustainably. I know that there was no sweatshops, that nobody was being treated like no human being was being treated like a commodity. I know that nobody is being exploited in the creation of my clothes. Another thing about the expense, it costs more. But the reality is that if we really think about all the clothes that we buy, if we think they're affordable because somebody's not getting what they were supposed to get. And then also we get those clothes, they're not made for us necessarily. The quality might not be that great. And we end up throwing them away, or even if we donate them, most of the clothes that people donate end up in landfills. So the reality is that to be more intentional about it, to get clothes, even if we spend a little bit more per per unit or like per piece. Maybe we have less clothes. Maybe we have a closet with less things in it, but these are things that are made for us and that we know where they come from and we know how they got here. And, another thing that I want to mention, this is something I care about. And I'm telling you, I'm not going to advertise stuff here that I don't care about. Sometimes people think like, well, I don't want to wear suits and like, I want to be comfortable. So being comfortable means that I have to wear sweats, or being comfortable means I got to wear flip-flops, or I got to whatever, and I get it. I feel that. But the reality is that most people have never worn clothes that actually fit them right. Most people have never worn suits that actually fit them. You know what I'm saying? I see most people, the first suit that they get, it's not for them. You know what I mean? It's just like, man, that doesn't fit. So you can't move in it, so all of this to say, Vice Gerund Official, if you go and follow Vice Gerund Official on social media, you'll see these beautiful pieces. They're located in Chicago, but the brother Usman does travel. And so if you stay in touch with him, take it from me, this will change the way that you relate to your clothes. They'll change the way that you relate to your body. They'll change the way that you relate to the people that you engage and interact with. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm really honored to be able to partner with them at Vice Gerund Official on the Travelers Podcast. The Travelers Podcast is sponsored by UPF, which is Unity Productions Foundation. They're a collective of artists that does really dope cultural creation and content. And specifically, we're sponsored by their program that's called Unfold Your Own Myth. This is a really dope project that seeks to empower young people from around the world, particularly in places where youth and communities are experiencing extreme hardships. This is a project that brings those youth together with writers and authors and poets and storytellers that understand how empowering it is, how much it really serves one's own humanity and sense of somebodyness to know that like my story matters because I matter. And not only does it matter for me to document my own story, to explore myself and express myself, but also there are other people, no matter how insignificant any of us might feel. The reality is that somebody out there can benefit from what you've been through and the wisdom that you've gleaned from what you've been through. And so the stories matter, and so this particular project brings together artists, creatives, poets. And so I'm one of the contributors and really blessed and honored to be that, along with other incredible creatives that have, and they've basically curated an online workshop series that can be held anywhere. So if you go to upf.tv/unfold. This is the Unfold Your Own Myth project. You'll be able to see how you can contribute to that, but also you can bring that this workshop series to your community, to the youth that are around you. If you're a teacher, if you work in community, if you work with youth, this is something that you can also offer them. So I was really grateful to be part of this project, that they asked me to be one of the contributors, and also really happy to be able to spread the word about UPF and the Unfold Your Own Myth project. Again, upf.tv/unfold. I hope you're enjoying listening and watching the Travelers Podcast as much as I'm enjoying making it. This is a new platform for me, and in a lot of ways, I feel the same way I did when I started going on tour with Atmosphere 20 years ago, where like I've been rapping a long time, but this is my chance to do it every single day on stage and really figure out what it means to be excellent at this. I've been having these conversations with people for a long time, but I'm just now starting to get into this particular format, and my intention is to be very good at it. I really want to be able to help people share their experiences and to share mine. I want you to know that if you go to brotherali.com and go to the area that's called Join, we have a feature there that's kind of similar to what people know of with Patreon, but it's basically a subscription service that we call our Caravan that allows you as listeners to to join the community around this particular project. And it's not just the podcast, but it's also the music that we offer, the learning series that we offer, the literary projects that we have coming. Don't tell anybody, but we got some literary projects coming. And basically this allows you to help us remain independent. It's very, very important to us at Travelers Media that we are able to explore ourselves and express ourselves and allow and facilitate for the people that are around us to do so honestly. And in order to do that, it's important that we remain fiercely and completely independent. So we have these, these sponsors and these that we partner with, but really we're supported by the people who watch and listen to and participate in the music. And also, when we say community and we say caravan, that's something that's really real. It's not just a way to try to get you to share your money with us, but we have different tiers. So the first tier, you come in and you contribute a little bit, but it really adds up and it goes a long way for us to cover our overhead and to be able to keep doing this stuff. But that gets you these episodes early and also without the ad breaks. So if you don't want to hear the ads, that's one tier. There's a second tier where you automatically, by joining and contributing, you get an oral history of my first project, which is my demo tape called Rites of Passage that I brought to Rhymesayers back in 98, 99. It came out in 2000. So it's me going through an oral history of how that project came to be in the early parts of my career. You also get the early access to the episodes of the podcast, and then you also get a few times a year exclusive digital gift bags with podcast content, music, some of my production, things that we don't offer to the public. These are exclusives that we give to the people that are part of the caravan. Now, the top level of the caravan it's a serious investment. But what we have there is you get all of those things, but also there's a private Slack channel where we really are seeking to curate and allow for a community kind of experience and vibe. So it's a limited number of spots because we want it to be intimate. When you sign up for that, you get all those things. Plus, we give you a Travelers Podcast t-shirt in a colorway that we don't offer anywhere else. In that Slack channel, though, we trade voice notes and we share the things that we're thinking about. Even before launch, this is the first episode. We already have people that just looked around on the website and found it. And so we've got, relationships that are forging. What I noticed over years of doing these shows is that I think it's because of the fact that I put all my hurt and my healing in my music. There are people that hear that and they're like, oh, I'm not alone. So then they come to the show and there are other people that are there for the same reason. Some people are just there because your brother can rap very well. But there are people that are there because they're like, yo, this guy is pouring his heart out and I relate to that. And so people meet at my shows. I've had people get married and have children. I've had, people forge long time bonds. I've had, all of these really dope things. And some of the people that started out being listeners, supporters, fans have become really dear friends of my family. You know what I'm saying? And so this caravan thing that we're really trying to curate and build, it is a really genuine and authentic extension of what we've done. I used to just trust the fact that I could go on tour and see your faces every year. And now for so many reasons, I've just learned that I can't necessarily trust that. But it's also given us the opportunity to use these digital platforms to try to really foster and facilitate connection between people. That's really what all this is about. Co-travelers, you know what I'm saying? So go to brotherali.com, go to the join section, find the tier that works well for you. And thank you as always for being part of this. And thank you for your support. My father-in-law and I was probably 20 years old at this time, where it's Sunday night, we're coming from the mosque, we've got suits on. I think I had spoken that night. We have on suits, we have on our kufis, ties, we're wearing dress shoes and overcoats. And after the meeting at the mosque, our wives decided they want to go grocery shopping. And we had my son with us. People hear me talking about my baby son, Fahim, throughout my career. Fahim was with us, a baby infant in a stroller. And so after the mosque, we decided we're going to go to, it was either Rainbow or Cub Foods for people that live in Minneapolis. And so we're sitting in the car in the parking lot, and our wives are inside shopping. They would shop for hours. It's just, that's just what they did. Every week we would go shopping. They would go in there, and it was like an event for them. And they'd be in there shopping and taking, hours. And so me and my father-in-law are sitting outside in his Cadillac, listening to the radio, just chilling. We're enjoying ourselves. We just came from the mosque. We're telling jokes. We always got along. They called me their son. Since then, we had a falling out, which was really sad and unfortunate. But, even after me and my first wife divorced, we had gotten married at 17, and we were married for almost 10 years. Even after we divorced, we remained close for a long time. And so we're sitting out there chilling and talking. All of a sudden, this big light lights up the whole sky. It was like it went from night to day immediately. And we realized it's a huge spotlight on the car. So my father-in-law gets out of the car and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" "Get the F back in the car." They just cursing, yelling, screaming, all these voices. It's obviously a group of people yelling. And we obviously right away, we know it's the police. "Get the F back in the effing car," cussing us out. Gets in the car. "Driver, turn the car off. Put your hands on the roof of the car. Driver, reach out throw the keys out of the car." You throw the keys out. "Reach out, reach around, open the door from the outside, step out, walk backwards towards me, get down on your knees, hands behind your head." Both of us, they did that one at a time. We step out of the car, lay down on the ground. We're laying on our faces in the snow, in the dirt. We got suits on. We just came from the mosque. We got suits on. We're laying there in the dirt, in the snow. They run up to us. They're rough. They're being aggressive. They handcuff us. They're squeezing. I feel squeezing my private parts, being hella rough with me, leaning elbows and knees and fists and all the stuff, forcing me deeper into the concrete, cursing at us, screaming at us. This is just out of nowhere. Finally, we figure out that, where the F are the effing guns? Where the F are the fucking guns, And it's like, what is going on? We have no idea what's even going on. Just out of nowhere, this all happens. So what we finally discover, and they start searching us, and then they took our shoes off, they took our coats off, they took our suit coats off. They're all underneath our shirt. They're searching us. They're almost strip searching us in the parking lot. Then they start searching the car. They search the inside of the car. They're throwing everything from inside the car, baby blankets and diaper bags and all kind of stuff just out on the street. Books, all the things that are in the car. Then they start looking under the hood of the car. They lift the hood up. They're searching in the engine. They got flashlights laying on the ground looking under the car. Apparently somebody called them, and this is what the report was. "We got a call that there's 2 black men in a yellow Cadillac." Yellow Cadillac, Midwest, you know what I'm saying? They're from Chicago and Gary. That they have guns and they're about to rob the little bank location that's inside the grocery store. So basically what happened is, what we were able to put together is that somebody just saw us sitting in the car for a long period of time. This is before cell phones. This is before Black Lives Matter. This is before knowing, the idea of a Karen. But somebody saw us sitting in the car. I'm guessing probably some white people maybe that worked at the store. And they can't just call and say, "Hey, there's black people in the car." This is not the first time that police have addressed me as black. I've been, Carnage, the executioner from Minneapolis, knows that we were sitting outside my house in North Minneapolis one time, and the police came and harassed us just for sitting outside in the hood. He gets my ID and he's like, "Ali, that's not your real name." And I'm like, "You're looking at my ID, sir. That's my ID." All this stuff. I said, "Is that what your mother named you? That's on your birth certificate?" I said, "No, I changed my name legally." "Oh, you changed it in prison?" And I've been stopped by police, and sometimes they would call it in. 6-foot black male, 250 pounds, da 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 da. And I could tell the difference, the very palpable difference when a police officer thinks I'm black versus when they think that I'm white. I've also had police help me, and clearly they thought I was white in those situations. But somebody called the police because they just saw what they thought were black men in the car. And they couldn't just say, hey, there's black people here and I'm scared of them. Can you come alleviate my fear? So they said that we had guns and that we're about to rob the store. So they searched us. And when they got done with us, they just said, hey, we get a call, we got to check it out. You understand. They give us their card, they put us back in the car, and they just drove away. And so we're sitting there freezing cold, wet, dirty. We were just having a nice family night, just came from our place of worship. 3 generations of a family trying to spend time together. You got Papa, and you got the kid, Grandma, Granny, and then you got the kids, and then you got the baby. This is a beautiful night we're trying to have. Grocery shopping together. They're giving us a ride, And so after the whole thing is over, I'm cold and I'm just rattled, and I start shaking, and I'm mad, and I'm crying, and I'm angry, and But one of the main things I noticed is that my father-in-law he's like, man, damn. He's like, man, I just got this suit out the cleaners. He's making all kind of jokes. He's calming me down. He's trying to help me get through it, because this is not a first for him. This is not a new thing for him. He's lived his entire life. He was probably in his 60s at this point. He's been living his whole life with this reality, I'll tell another story about police that's directly related. So this whole time, I'm an Imam at the mosque, I'm teaching the classes, and I was given the name Ali. And for a while I had thought that maybe rapping it's probably not a likely thing for me. It's probably not really going to happen. I just don't look the part. I'm doing this whole Muslim thing now. Like, I live in Minnesota. I live where, ain't nobody coming to Minnesota looking for anybody, especially not somebody that looks like the KFC man. It's just not going to happen. I just kind of put it to the back burner. And that wasn't until I met the Rhymesayers. I always did it, and people always still knew me for it. My particular community never discouraged it. They never discouraged music. And so I would perform, and I performed at Islamic events. I used to perform at Juneteenth. I performed at Rondo Days. Rondo is our version of, the Tulsa race riots. We had Rondo. We'll talk about that. I hope to have Stokely Williams on the program, and maybe Tish Jones, and we'll talk to them about Rondo. That's our version of the Tulsa race riots in Minnesota. But I performed at those. I performed at Juneteenth. I performed at the Urban League Family Day. I performed at Biscuits and Blues, which was a jazz blues club down. I performed at Riverview Supper Club, which was a hood spot. I performed at North Commons, Disco T, famous DJ, hip hop DJ in the Twin Cities, Disco T and Travatron. I don't know if Disco T remembers, but one point in North Minneapolis at North Commons, people were rapping and Disco T was like, no, he can rap. Let him rap. Watch. He can rap. Let him rap. Disco T. I performed at Sabathani Community Center in South Minneapolis, performed at house parties and all kind of stuff like that. Never stopped doing it, but it just wasn't a focus until I met Rhymesayers. And Musab from Rhymesayers was a Muslim, but I was from North Side. They were all from the South Side. But meeting them, I realized you can have your own career. You don't need to wait for a record deal. You can just make music. You're not trying to be in the industry. You're just making the music, and whoever likes it will listen, and they'll become your little fan base and your little audience. So I said, all right, I can do that. I figured the Muslims would support me. I figured, maybe you won't pay your bills doing it. You never get rich doing it. You'll never get famous, but you can make your music, and you can live exercise and practice your art and your culture. So I met them and I said, all right, I'm gonna get busy doing it. So I started working on a project, but I didn't have the money to put it out. Dear friend of mine, one of these guys that came from street life, amazing story. Really very, very close friend of mine. Some of these guys that come from street life, they come from these life or death situations in life, and they have to be very disciplined, and they have to be very almost rigid. And a lot of those guys, when they become Muslim, they become some of the most disciplined, virtuous, upright, righteous people that you could imagine. They will not violate a single rule. They pray all their prayers in their time, starting at 4 a.m. They pray all 5 prayers a day. They're not going to curse. They'll never smoke a cigarette. They'll never take a drink. They'll never be alone with a woman that's not their wife. They'll never, anything. They follow the religion to a T. And my friend is one of those, and we've been friends now for probably 25 years. One of my dearest friends in the world. So he was pulled over. He drives crazy though. And if you're watching this, brother, you drove, especially in those days, drove crazy. Police pulled him over in North Minneapolis, and they accused him of drunk driving. And they were trying to get him to get out of the car. And he's just saying, I don't need to get out of the car. There's no signs that there's no signs of me, here's my license, here's my registration. They broke his window. They pulled him out of the car. They beat him up. They brutalized him. They beat him up badly. They pulled his wife out of the car, who came to Islam with him, and she wore the hijab. She's a woman, same thing, practicing Islam, Orthodox Muslim. She would only show her hands and face in public, and this is her, choosing to do so. Didn't shake hands with men that she wasn't, related to. And they had a man search her, and they pulled her hijab off in public. They violated them. And then they arrested him. This is what they always do. They accused them of something. He did the breathalyzer test. They find out, no, he hasn't had a drink. He didn't even drink coffee at this time. Now he does. Now me and him are coffee snobs, you know what I'm saying? But back then he didn't drink coffee. Keep him in jail overnight. So Keith Ellison, who's now Attorney General Keith Ellison, first Muslim congressman, black Muslim congressman from the state of Minnesota. He was just Brother Keith to us back in those days. And somebody that we love, very, very sincere brother. Inshallah, hopefully he'll be a guest on this podcast. He represented my friend in a lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis, and he was able to win a settlement. And that settlement money is what paid for me to make Rites of Passage. So literally my entrance into making music professionally and releasing music comes from my community supporting me, from the reality of police brutality. This is how I entered into the game. I want to say something really quickly about the choice, because then the question becomes, well, what's going to be my stage name? And at that time I was teaching children. I was teaching Muslim children. I actually, through that, I didn't graduate from high school. I got married at 17 and started just working jobs, didn't finish high school to support my wife. And then we had a son. And then, I just worked these different jobs up until I started touring. And at this time I was teaching children. And from that, I ended up teaching these 2 amazingly brilliant young girls, and their father was on the board of directors at a black charter school. And so I ended up teaching kindergarten at a black charter school in St. Paul called Success Academy. They just figured it out. I didn't graduate from high school, didn't go to college, didn't have a teaching license, but this family said, no, he taught our children, and trust me, he should do it. So nobody said anything. I just taught kindergarten for a year. Really amazing experience. So anyway, I was given the name Ali for a number of reasons. I love the name Ali because of Muhammad Ali is one of, I believe, the greatest person that I've lived at the same time as this human being. Muhammad Ali is one of my biggest heroes in life. And when they offered me that name, I really loved it and I resonated with it. There are certain Muslim names that have become part of the Black American lexicon of names. And I think maybe in hindsight, maybe subconsciously, I didn't choose those names. Jamal and Hakeem and some of these names like this. But when I was offered the name Ali as my name, I took that name, and I ended up, as soon as I got a chance to, I changed it legally. But my parents called me Ali. I've been Ali for going on 30 years, next year it'll be 30 years. And so this was my name. In that community, we always, the way of interacting socially was that we always referred to each other in every interaction with terms of respect and terms of endearment. So with men, the term of respect would be sir, and the term of endearment would be brother, and with women, ma'am and sister. So when we spoke to people, sir and ma'am and brother and sister would be in almost every sentence. You would never, if you called someone just by their name, if you would say like, oh, who did that? And you were to just say, oh, Kareem did that. If you just said Kareem, it was disrespectful. You would always say, brother Kareem. And when you spoke to him, you would always say, yes, sir, brother. No, ma'am, sister. In every sentence, ma'am or sister would be in every sentence with a woman, even if she's younger than you, even with children. Like we spoke to children like that. And this idea of like reclaiming our names, specifically for African people and the children of enslaved Africans whose names were robbed from them. But, also I think for me, there was this idea that like Islam was giving me the opportunity to restructure my identity in a way that made more sense to me, along with the fact that I really believe in this religion. I just believe in it. And there's nothing that I found in the religion of Islam that I don't believe in. I accept it completely, and we'll talk on this podcast about what that means, and if people I'm really open to people asking me hard questions and serious. I really take that's a really important thing for me. But so I was talking with these group of children. I said, I'm performing again. I'm making this project. What should I be called? And one of the little girls, these two little girls, Hajia and Nakami Green, shout out to them. Shout out to their amazing mother, Hanatu. Their mother is from Nigeria. Their father is African-American, Mr. Green. And they said, you taught us that we are Sister Hanatu, Sister Hajia, and your brother Ali. And don't let anybody call you anything other than that. And so I said, okay. And then since then, there's always been confusion about me. And this is why I just want to tell these stories. And people interpret me however they want to. I'm not here to tell people what I am, what I'm not. I certainly have my understanding of myself, but people have argued. And there have always been people that assumed that I was black, partially, I think, like I said, because of albinism, partially because of me being a Muslim. There are people that think albinos are black. And most of the albinos in the world, it's, disproportionately, like I said, 1 in 17,000 white people are albino. 1 in 5,000 Africans are albino. 1 in 1,700 Tanzanians are albino in East Africa. So there is that link. But then also the fact that I'm Muslim, people that think American Muslims are black. Also, I think part of it is related to my name. People hear the word brother and they think, well, a brother is a black person. I never had a branding meeting about my name. I never had that sort of intentional thing. And when I made this album, and it's not even an album, I call it Rites of Passage is my demo tape. When I made that project and when I had to put a name on it, and all those things, even making Shadows in the Sun, I was looking up to Atmosphere and we didn't have record deals. We didn't have distribution. We were performing around town. We were performing for people that we knew. And so my thought and understanding was always that the people that would hear my music would be people from my community and they understand me. However they interpret me, they get it. They know they have the full context to understand that. So when Shadows on the Sun came out, people started writing. That happened around the time that I started to go on tour. And so people started to hear this like kind of underground independent movement started to happen. And we started going on tour. I started touring with Atmosphere. Atmosphere were the first ones to take me out on tour and really teach me how to make a living as a musician. And then after that, the people that brought me out immediately after Atmosphere were all people associated with Black Islam. So Brand Nubian were the second ones to take us on tour. You know, I went on tour with Ghostface Killah and with the Jizza. I went on tour for a year with Rakim. You know, we did stuff with Big Daddy Kane. We did stuff with Public Enemy. I opened for MF Doom. I developed a relationship, you know, later on, but with Yasin Bey and Mos Def and Kweli and, you know, but those were the artists that initially supported us right out of the gate. And like me specifically took me on tour, were all these artists, you know. And so there are people who had the feeling that like, oh, well, Brother Ali's obviously Black. And then later on find out, no, all right, he's albino, but he's born to white parents and he became a Muslim and so on. So, and different people have different ways of understanding that and processing it. And there are people that have said that they thought that I lied about it. I never told anybody that I was Black. There's a song that I have called, what's the name of that song? Win Some, Lose Some. And the song is about the fact that in high school, this group of white boys, you know, there's always these white boys that wanted to be down. White boys that dressed, quote unquote, the way that we understood it, that they were fans of rap music. They learned about the culture through listening to music and watching rap videos. And they, you know, they wore Raiders hats and they talked with, you know, hip hop slang, and there would be a group of them and they hung out with each other and they wanted to be accepted and they usually weren't. Those people have always hated me. Like those, you know, at that time, they would call that talking Black, acting Black, whatever. Like those people have always really despised me. And when I was in high school, there was a group of them that made up a reason to jump me. And so I made a song about it called Win Some, Lose Some. In the song, this is on my first album, again, no distribution, no video, no radio. I said in the song, they're trying to coax me into fighting them. And in the song I say, I'm peaceful and you're lucky I'm a righteous Black man. And then and what rhymes with the line is, you thought I had issues now, I really had them back then. Because I'm talking about the fact that I've had this weird relationship with my own identity. You know, what does this mean? Like, how do I understand myself? You know, and we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media, we didn't have hashtags. You know, living in Wisconsin and Michigan and then Minneapolis, you were limited to the people that you had access to, the books you had access to, the videotapes you had access to, the cassette tapes you had access to. Stuff was really limited, you know. And so I was making fun of myself and the fact that this has been a journey for me, and there's times where it's been really messy and where I've been really messy. So I said, you're lucky I'm a righteous Black man. I'm talking to these white dudes that are trying to jump me. You're lucky I'm a righteous Black man. You thought I had issues now, I really had them back then. And then also in that song I say, they tried to get me down. They never got me down. They beat my ass. I got stitches here. This tooth had to be shaved down. They chipped my tooth, you know, all this stuff. But they didn't get me down and they didn't knock me out. I actually have pictures from it. If you're nice to me, maybe I'll show you later. I have pictures from that. They tried to get me. I said, y'all ain't getting me on the linoleum so 3 white boys can start stomping only one. So, you know, if a person is really listening to that song and understanding it, they can see what it is. But then people started to write in interviews and articles about me. Brother Ali is a Black albino. You know, also what's important to understand, a highlight here is that this particular section, so I kind of was in 2 worlds. So I'm going on tour on the one hand with, you know, Brand Nubian and Rakim, and Wu-Tang and stuff like that. All these like black Muslims, or these like 5%ers, black Muslims, Nation of Islam, and then also with atmosphere and idea and abilities. And, you know, there's this whole new, very, very new movement in the late 90s, early 2000s of like the one white kid that really grew up around hip hop, grew up as part of hip hop from all these different places. You got my man Sage Francis in Providence. You got Aesop Rock in Long Island. You got LP in Red Hook, Brooklyn. You got the Grouch and Eli in Oakland. You got Idea in St. Paul. You got, you know, and then Slug and Ant, who are black, white, and native. But if you're not in, which in South Minneapolis, we know what that is, because that's very normal in South Minneapolis. In other places, they just see atmosphere as white. That's a whole other thing. And so I'm on tour, and then, you know, Rhymesayers, the label that I learned and grew with, you know, black-owned record label. Sadiq, the owner of the label, is his mother is white, father is black. You know, he became a Muslim at one point. And then, you know, Musab is on that label, a black brother from South Minneapolis who's Muslim, like Orthodox Muslim like me. So this is the world, you know. But there was this entire movement of white dudes who were really part of hip hop growing up. You know, Sage Francis, all these guys, they've been rapping just like me from the time they were 7 years old, and they're nice, they're good, they're creative, they found their voice. You know, they're talented, they can battle, they can go off the head. You know, they had to prove themselves in black environments over and over and over again. But what started to happen is that a movement started to grow of listeners who didn't necessarily feel like drawn to hip hop, until there was this kind of cohort of legitimate white underground independent rappers. And I was resentful of that. You know, I grew up with this history of white people, you know, denigrating black art and then fetishizing it and then learning how to do it and then crowning themselves the king. I grew up with that awareness, and I did not want to contribute to that, but I did appreciate the artists that I was around. You know, Atmosphere is dope. I could talk for hours about how ill Atmosphere is. Idea was dope. You know, one of the things that Sadiq at Rhymesayers told me, I talked to him about this, you know, when I first met him. I said, man, you know, when I come to you guys' events, there's a lot of white people. And he said, yeah, man, this is the wave. This is what's going to happen. You know, white people start learning how to do stuff and they actually get good at it. And then white listeners that never would have, either because they didn't feel like they were welcome or they just didn't care. But there are a number of those writers, listeners, is just some straight white supremacist, white superiority complex stuff where like they didn't care about rap music before. They didn't know about it. They didn't know the lineage, the legacy. They didn't know about the greats, you know? And they really were laying claim to white artists in this way that was really disgusting, you know? So I was, you know, but then also it was this built-in group of people that were very supportive of our music. And what I learned over time is that I can say what I want to say. So people started writing, Brother Ali is a black albino, or he looks white, but he's black. And so, you know, one of my mentors that I looked up to at that time, and still do, pulled me to the side and he showed me a magazine article. He said, look, they wrote here that you're black. I said, yeah, that's starting to happen. And he was like, I know you didn't say that. I said, no, of course not. He said, but what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I don't want to just be like, I'm white. You know what I mean? Because I don't resonate with that. It doesn't feel true to me. You know, I tell people that you know, but then also I don't want to play into this thing that they're doing, you know, and I don't know how to have a nuanced conversation with these people about this. Because these specific people that are assuming this, you know, these are the people that don't understand it. He said, look, your job is to figure out how to talk to them about this. Your job is to figure out how to explain yourself and how to tell your truth. And he and others really reminded me of a story of Malcolm X, where he spoke at Harvard, and there was this big backlash. Malcolm X, the hate that hate produced. They're anti-white, they're racist, blah blah blah. So there was a white woman from the South who attended his lecture at Harvard. She was a student at Harvard, and she fell in love. She said, he's telling the truth. This man is amazing, and all he's doing is telling the truth. So she got on a plane and went from Boston to Harlem and went to the Black Muslim restaurant in Harlem and posted up as a white lady in 1963 maybe, and waited for Minister Malcolm X to arrive. And when he did, she stopped him and she said, I was there when you spoke at Harvard. Everything you're saying is true. How can I help you? What can I do? And Malcolm says, nothing. Now in the movie it's portrayed as, being at Harvard. But he says nothing. And she was heartbroken, and that was portrayed as being a really cold moment. The whole thing about the Nation of Islam is like, you've done enough. We're here to support ourselves, to do for self, to respect our own, accept our own, do for self. You don't have a role in this, But what Malcolm wrote in his autobiography is that if I could see her again, if I could talk to her, what I would tell her is that white supremacy, anti-blackness, racism, this racialized system that we have, it doesn't come from the black community, so you don't need to come here to solve that problem. That problem emanates from the white community, and you're in the white community. You already are where the problem originates. So if you really believe, then your job is to minister to your people. And what I realized, not right away, not on my first album, but after that album got out, and after I started realizing that I'm heard by people who don't know me, it's not just my community. I'm not performing at Juneteenth anymore. I'm not performing at Rondo Days anymore. Now I'm in Ohio. Now I'm in San Francisco. Now I'm in, and when I'm in this white side of the, when I'm in this white pocket, these are white people relating to me and listening to me, but they also are sincere. There's a level of sincerity. There's a level of connection. There's a level of authenticity there that really was and remains to be really touching to me. And so we didn't have social media to clear this up. This is 2003 that my first album came out. There's no MySpace. There's no YouTube. There's no Facebook Live. There's none of that. So I, on my second album, it took 5 years between my first and second album, but on my second album, I made a song called Daylight, and I learned by talking it through with people around me, how to address this, how to discuss it, how to do it. The producer of this podcast, BK1, Brendan Kelly, really genuine, sincere, dear, dear, dear friend of mine. A white guy who's really deeply entrenched in anti-racist work and has been since he was a teenager. He's the first white guy that I knew that knew all the stuff I knew. And I knew I learned it from being in militant black spaces. So I'm like, how do you know this stuff? He's one of the people that talked it through with me. So on Daylight, on my second album, Undisputed Truth, I said, they asked me and I'm still, I'm learning the tools for how to do this. Understand, if you are a European American person that is deeply committed to anti-racist reality, work, etc., then there's not a lot of blueprints for you. There's not a lot of examples for how that can be done. I think social media has helped with that to a certain degree, because at least you can learn the language, and at least you can, white people that don't live in black communities can follow black activists, and influencers and speakers and educators and so on and so forth. And now you can go watch James Baldwin speak, and now you can go watch, you can go and watch these things and listen to people, whereas people didn't have as much access to that stuff before. So what I said on my second album is, they asked me if I'm black or white. I'm neither. Race is a made-up thing. I don't believe in it. Wish I wouldn't have said that, because that line was taken out of context. Race is a social construct, but it's science fiction, but it's social reality. It's as true as money. Money is a social construct too. The fact that a piece of paper has value, that's also a social construct. It's real because everybody believes it's real. Same with Bitcoin and all this other stuff, the stock market, etc. So I said, they asked me if I'm black or white. I'm neither. Race is a made-up thing. I don't believe in it. Now, in my years of speaking about race since then, hurt and offended and insecure white people always quote that line back to me. But if you listen to the rest of what I said, they asked me if I'm black or white. I'm neither. Race is a made-up thing. I don't believe in it. My genes tie me to those that despised me and made a living killing the ones that inspired me. I'm not just talking about singing and dancing. I was taught life and manhood by black men. So a small part of me feels like I am them. So I'm a product of that understanding, and a small part of me feels like I am them. Does that make me a liar? Maybe. But I don't want the white folks that praise me to think they can claim me, because you didn't make me. You don't appreciate what I know to be great, yet you relate to me. And that frustrates me, and what can I say? Because I know that I benefit from something I hate. But make no mistake, our connection ain't fake. It's never too late to clear off the slate. If you follow my tape, then you know what I'm about. If something comes up, then it must come out. This is me on my second album, starting on my journey of telling the truth. And I realized that for me, the way to do it is to just share my experiences. I hope that I don't have claims. I hope that I don't claim to be the person with the answers, or to claim to be the expert or the guru or the sheikh or the anything. What I'm here to do is to explore myself and express myself, and to connect with other people on that basis, So there's a lot more I could say about all of this. There's 100 stories that I would love to share, and I just don't have the time to do them. You've already been extremely generous with your time and listening to this. But these are a few of the stories that I just wanted to really string together, to help give some context for who this person is on this end of the mic, and I'm going to stop short of explaining my intention for myself, or the way that I interpret these stories. I'm not going to interpret. As many times as I've talked about this, there are people that misunderstand, and I don't think that I don't think there's anything I'm going to say that's going to make it make sense to people who don't understand. And I've become maybe comfortable, or maybe I just have a level of acceptance with the fact that my job is to try to be sincere. It's enough of a being in this world and navigating the human experience and the human condition, that I'm like everybody else. I have a soul that is the breath of God. The divine is the breath of God, is what emanates us. I also have a heart, a spiritual heart, and that heart is in different states all the time, in different stations. Sometimes I'm experiencing gratitude. Sometimes I have a lack of gratitude. Sometimes I'm present. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm patient. Sometimes I'm hasty. I have all those experiences that the heart experiences that as everyone else. And I also have an intellect that needs to figure out how to frame things, that needs to live in a language environment, that has ideologies, that has, frameworks. I have my frameworks, and we all have our psychological frames, our intellectual frames, our cognitive frames. We all have the foundation that through which we see things. And then I also have an ego, and the ego just demands what it wants. You know what I'm saying? All those things are part of who I am. So I've become more and more accepting of the fact that I just want to try to be sincere, and that's enough of a challenge with the human condition and also the condition of the world. And to connect based on just trying to be real and making a lot of mistakes. And, it's not about being right. It's not about having the answers. It's about being a seeker and being a traveler, which is pretty perfect for how to wrap this one up. This is what this podcast will be about. And we have a lot more to discuss, and I have a lot more to share, and I have a lot more to learn. And I will learn from the people on this podcast that are guests, and I learn from you. So I'm going to leave it there and sign off and just send you love and send you well wishes for you and everyone you care about and care for. And just again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on this journey together. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for sticking with us all the way to the end. I'm sorry you just had to listen to me run my mouth for about 2 hours. I'm deeply grateful to you. And again, this is a dream come true for me, and you are part of that. So I really appreciate you very, very much. One thing that I wanted to add, just to kind of bring home the story about my father, is that when my father died of suicide, they don't like to say, my wife is a therapist, and they don't like to say committed suicide. They like to say died of suicide or completed suicide. That was 2010 on the 4th of July. I was on tour. I flew to Pennsylvania, where he was living with his young wife and her children, his stepchildren, my stepbrothers and sisters. And I was present with her for a period of time around his funeral and things like that. And so we were going around Allentown, where they lived, Pennsylvania, and his young stepkids would say, we would go by, like a gas station, and they would say, oh, the guy in there knows your music. Or we would go by another place, and he would say, like, oh, there's a lady in there that works there, and she's a big fan of yours. All over town, all the places that they would stop. We go to the Dairy Queen or something, and they're like, oh, that guy knows your music. He's a fan of yours. And so finally I asked, like, how do you know that? And it turns out that my father would, any place that he saw some young people or some people that he thought might be hip hop fans, he would go in there and he would say to them, hey, you guys like hip hop music? Do you like underground hip hop? And they'd be like, yeah, we do. And they said, like, do you know who Brother Ali is? And if they say, yeah, he'd be like, that's my son. You know what I mean? And then he would go around and talk to all these people, and he would, this whole thing. Also, my stepmother, his wife, found an entire computer in his office that was dedicated to following my career, that he just, he had saved every article that had been written about me and every interview and every YouTube clip and all of that stuff. So I just wanted to share that also at the end. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. There's some stuff that I'm going to look at my list here just to make sure that I get it all. I want to make sure that you remember about special shout out to Zakat Foundation. Want to make sure that you go to brotherali.com. When you're there, you can go to the join section and join the caravan. All of the tour and VIP stuff are there for the Travelers Tour in the event section. There's merch there, all of that good stuff. We'll be on tour with our brother Mally and my DJ Last Word. Make sure you come through. Special shout out and appreciation and special thanks to Amna Mirza, to Mansoor Panawala, to DJ Last Word, to Amr Rahman, to my brother Ant, who produced the song The Travelers, which is the theme song for this podcast. Want to give a special shout out to Darian Washington, and a very, very special shout out to Mark from Medina, who made the logo for the Travelers podcast, that super dope stamp. Go check out Medina art. Most of my heroes don't appear on no stamp. It's something Chuck D said back in the day. So Mark from Medina made a stamp with Chuck D on it, and then has an entire line of hip hop heroes, our heroes, that are on these stamps. And I'm really honored to be one of them. And he allowed us to use it for the Travelers podcast. Travelers Podcast is produced by Brendan Kelly, aka BK1, my dear friend, and is a production of Travelers Media. Thank you so very much for being here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.